Chapter 3573. Sword technique. Liujia's eyes were cold and filled with killing intent, like a ferocious beast that wanted to eat people. All right, facing the naked threat, Nietian's reaction was very calm, and he only smiled. He had never been afraid of Liujia. Even if the latter's aura was strong, he did not feel threatened at all. Liujia won the battle between Su Kuanga and Liujia. Next was the ranking battle between Tsangqiong and Su Kuanga. But Tsangqiong took the initiative to propose that he accept the previous ranking and was ranked behind Su Kuanga. He could already see that there was something strange about the divine spiritual space. The Wolf Emperor did not say anything and nodded in agreement. In this way, the 6th place was Su Kuanga, and the 7th place was Tsangqiong. And after the second round of battle, the ranking changed again from front to back. Bodhi Zi, Lan Zhuing, Qisha, Liujia, Nietian. Because Liujia had released 4 wolves at the same time, it shocked everyone, so his ranking was in front of Nietian. The rules of the third round of battle were similar to before. The first Green Wolf Master was safe for the time being. The other 4 Green Wolf Masters would fight one-on-one. The strongest would advance, and the loser would be eliminated. At this time, the one who was ranked at the front of the 4 was Lan Zhuing. She had the right to choose her opponent. Lan Zhuing's gaze swept across Nietian and the other 2, and finally fell on Nietian, and said lightly, "Nietian, go to battle." "Okay." Nietian smiled lightly. He was not surprised that Lan Zhuing chose him as her opponent. Previously in the Sky Wolf Challenge, Lan Zhuing had fought with Nietian, and Nietian took 3 of her sword strikes, forcing her to admit defeat. At this time, Nietian and Lan Zhuing's divine souls appeared in the divine spiritual space at the same time. The crowd looked at the two and couldn't help but discuss. Nietian has encountered this swordswoman. I'm afraid his path as the Green Wolf will come to an end here. Just who is that swordswoman? I heard that she lost to Nietian when she challenged Sirius. I wonder if that's true? She did lose to Nietian, but her 3 sword strikes completely suppressed Nietian. Nietian was only able to block 3 of them. But now is the moment of life and death. She won't give Nietian any chance. That swordswoman once gave orders to the Yin-Yang elders. I wonder who she is. She's probably a genius from a higher sacred world. As the crowd spoke, they couldn't help but look at Nietian with sympathy. If Nietian's opponent had been Liujia, he might have been able to go further, but he had encountered Lan Zhuing. Nietian, I underestimated you when I lost to you in the Wolf Slave field. This time I'll give it my all. Lan Zhuing said indifferently in the divine spiritual space. Her beautiful eyes flickered with a cold light, and the sword intent around her surged with a sharp, murderous intent. Nietian's eyes narrowed when he sensed the murderous intent. This was the first time he had seen such a sharp, murderous intent from Lan Zhuing. It seemed that Lan Zhuing was really going to give it her all this time. Boom! Afterwards, Lan Zhuing unleashed a terrifying sword aura. Streaks of blue sword light circulated in the air like halos, forming ripples of light. Icy blue runes appeared around her eyes. Sword spirit body. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly, and the corners of his mouth curved into a smile. His whole body was full of fighting intent. In the battle in the Wolf Slave field, Nietian already knew that Lan Zhuing had the sword spirit body, an extremely rare bloodline martial body. Warriors with the sword spirit body had the sword essence of heaven and earth in their bloodline. If this special bloodline martial body was developed to the extreme, the swordsman could integrate with heaven and earth and comprehend the supreme sword essence of heaven and earth. Lan Zhuing directly activated the sword spirit body. Obviously, she regarded Nietian as a real opponent. Blue sea reflects the moon, 9-layered waves. The next moment, the sword intent around Lan Zhuing's body soared to the extreme. The blue sea reflects the moon, the original spirit sword, streaked across the void, and suddenly the ice blue sword intent bloomed. 9 wild waves appeared in the air, like giant beasts in the sea, pressing down on Nietian. What a strong sword intent! Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was quite surprised in his heart. Lan Zhuying was indeed a swordsman at the first level of the Oracle realm. The instantaneous, explosive power of the sword intent was really amazing. The rolling waves seemed to contain an endless amount of sword intent, layer after layer, majestic and boundless, giving off a sense of awe-inspiring oppression. It was obvious that during the battle in the wolf-slave field, Lan Zhuying did not use her real strength. Now she went all out. You are too naive to think that you could defeat me with one sword. At this time, Tian's eyes flickered slightly, and he smiled faintly. Then he released the Sky Evolution Saint Spirit and the Omniscient Saint Spirit at the same time, and a terrible holy power rushed into the 100 meridians of the martial body, stimulating his sword intent to the extreme. Boom! The sword intent suddenly erupted like a mad dragon. A strong, murderous aura surged around Tian, as if it wanted to tear the world apart. Unity of heaven and man, Yang Chun's sacrifice. Then, the corner of Tian's mouth twitched, and he said softly. The sky's sword slashed in the air, and the sword shadow was like a mountain shaking the void. Bang! 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 The sword shadow was like a dragon, crashing into the 9-fold raging waves, and a terrible roar came from the void. Waves of power raged crazily, extremely sharp. This was the most direct collision between the sword intent and the sword move. The power contained in the sword intent burst out like thousands of sharp blades, striking the void, making ear-piercing whistling sounds. So strong, the crowd couldn't help but shiver when they saw this scene, and they couldn't help but exclaim. The battle between Tian and Lan Zhuying in the divine soul space, and the crowd couldn't feel any energy fluctuations. But the scene and the state of the divine soul space allowed them to directly see the intensity of the battle. But at this time, the most shocking thing was Tian's power. It was unimaginable that a warrior in the 3rd level of heaven rhythm could burst out such a terrifying power. Bang! At this moment, 2 muffled sounds were heard, and Tian and Lan Zhuiying's figures were sent flying at the same time. How is this possible? Lan Zhuiying retreated a few hundred meters, and after regaining her balance, she couldn't help but gasp in shock when she looked at Tian. She had already felt that Tian's sword intent aura had increased by a lot, and now she was sure that Tian's sword Dao realm had increased from the 3rd level to the 7th level. But how is this possible? A swordsman was actually able to raise his sword intent realm in an instant. Moreover, his sword intent had risen by 4 levels. It was truly unbelievable. Lan Zhuiying, your sword intent is stronger than mine, but my sword moves are stronger than yours. Tian steadied himself, and his eyes flickered. He ignored Lan Zhuiying's surprise and said calmly, the first attack between the two was purely a competition of sword Dao strength. Even though Tian had increased his sword Dao strength to the 7th level with the help of the 2 Saint Souls, his sword intent was still weaker than Lan Zhuiying's. After all, the latter was a swordsman at the 1st level of the Oracle realm. But the sword moves that Tian used were more brilliant than Lan Zhuiying's. The sacred heaven-defying sword was comprehended from the tri-element sacred array, and it was far more powerful than ordinary sword techniques. Chapter 3574. Chapter 3569. Sword Intent. Tian's eyes flickered with astonishment as he sensed the fluctuation of sword intent in the air. He didn't expect that Lan Zhuiying's sword intent would increase once again. Tian, I've said it before, I will give it my all in this battle. Lan Zhuiying's eyes flickered with coldness as she said in a deep voice, since I will give it my all, you won't stand a chance. That's not for sure. Tian's eyes darkened as his lips curled into a faint smile. He didn't dislike strong opponents. On the contrary, he liked them very much. If his opponents were all weak, then what was the point of such a battle? Blue ocean reflecting the moon, killing of the cold moon. Lan Zhuiying's beautiful eyes abruptly narrowed. After that, the jade sea mirroring moon arced through the air, as though the space couldn't withstand the sword pressure. A low rumbling sound rang out as an icy blue mark appeared. That boundless sword intent actually condensed into an icy blue moon in the air. Very good. Nietion's eyes flickered as the corner of his mouth twitched. He seemed to be extremely excited. The stronger Lan Zhuiying was, the more he wanted to fight. Die. Lan Zhuiying let out a deep roar, and the ice-blue moon suddenly moved. Like a blue wild beast, it charged towards Nietion. Nietion's lips twitched as he stomped his foot on the ground. Instantly, numerous sword inscriptions appeared, and a terrifying aura of sword intent spread out for tens of thousands of meters. Sword sealing forbidden array, demon, sword burning the world. In the next moment, the Hao Yin sword in his hand fell. Suddenly, there was a roar in the air, and a terrible shadow of the sword appeared. The light of the sword was dazzling, and a terrible sword will burned like fire, as if it wanted to burn everything. The scene in the spiritual space made everyone's eyes tremble as they gasped. Lan Zhuiying and Nietion were too strong. That kind of endless power was so strong that even the spiritual space could feel its destructive power. Boom! Boom! In Ji Hao's spiritual space, a thunderous boom covered the whole world, as if it was going to destroy everything. Bang! Chi chi chi. In the next moment, two extremely strong sword intents collided with each other. The heavens and earth roared, and the void seemed to be destroyed. The incomparably violent power collided violently, annihilating everything, and the ear-piercing sound reverberated endlessly. Nietion and Lan Zhuiying stepped back at the same time, almost to the edge of Nietion's spiritual space. Not only did Nietion use the power of the sword formation in this attack, but he also integrated the power of the heavenly Tao shackles into it, causing the sword intent within the sword formation to be even more violent. Even so, Nietion was still at a disadvantage in this clash of swords. After he steadied himself, there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, and his face was slightly pale. After all, Lan Zhuiying was a swordsman at the first sky of the Oracle realm, and her sword intent contained the power of Oracle. Even if Nietion used the double Saint Souls, he could not make up for the gap between their sword intents. Nietion, how many more attacks can you take? Lan Zhuiying stood in the air, her eyes cold, and said coldly, "It's not that easy for you to defeat me." Nietion smiled faintly. The blood at the corner of his mouth disappeared, and he regained his previous fierceness. "I'd like to see if you can still be so arrogant after my next attack." Lan Zhuiying smiled coldly, and a fierce killing intent burst out from her body. Then she took a step forward, and the blue sea reflects the moon was swung out. An icy blue killing intent appeared in the void, and suddenly fell on Nietion. Nietion frowned slightly, and then he swung his sword in the opposite direction. Rumble! In the spiritual space, violent roars came one after another. The crowd could no longer see the figures of Nietion and Lan Zhuiying. They could only see two different kinds of sword lights, colliding and devouring each other. After a while, the aura of the sword intent in the spiritual space weakened slightly, and Nietion and Lan Zhuiying appeared again. After a few exchanges of sword strikes, Nietion's body was covered in a few wounds. However, his expression was still calm and tranquil, without the slightest fluctuation. Lan Zhuiying was not injured, but her pretty face did not look good. She even looked a bit ferocious, and her whole body was filled with a strong, killing intent. Sure enough, the spiritual space has a great impact on a warrior's soul consciousness. Nietion looked at Lan Zhuiying, frowned slightly, and thought to himself, although Lan Zhuiying was competitive, she was definitely not a cruel and bloodthirsty person. At this moment, her state was completely different from when she fought with Nietion in the wolf slave field. The killing intent in her body was like a beast that had been aroused, soaring wildly and completely uncontrollable. It seemed that in the spiritual space, there was a hidden spiritual power that could stimulate the beast hidden deep in a warrior's body. Nietion, you are stronger than I thought, but this battle is over. At this moment, Lan Zhuiying said cold. Then, her whole body's aura surged crazily. Suddenly, 9 horrible sword intents appeared and kept circulating around her body. Sword aura. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was surprised. It seemed that Lan Zhuying would really use all her strength for the next attack. She actually gathered the power of 9 sword auras at the same time. Even for a swordsman at the first sky of Oracle, it was not easy to gather 9 sword auras at the same time. Come on. The corner of Nietion's mouth twitched. His body shook, and outside his body, 7 horrible auras of sword intents appeared and surged crazily. They were the 7 sword auras. After activating the double Saint Souls, his sword principle had reached the amazing 7th sky of sword aura. But he was still a swordsman at the 3rd sky of sword aura. At this moment, he could gather 7 sword auras, which showed how terrifying his understanding and control of sword intent was. This boy is really scary. Outside the spiritual space, the Wolf Emperor looked at Nietion, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble in surprise. Generally speaking, swordsmen could only gather sword auras under extreme circumstances. Even for swordsmen at the 7th sky of sword aura, very few could gather 7 sword auras. But Nietion could gather 7 sword auras. It was really scary. On the other side, the Bodhiseed frowned and said in a deep voice, "Nietion, your talent in sword principle is beyond my expectations." He was a swordsman, and his understanding of sword intent was better than that of ordinary people. He knew very well how difficult it was to gather 7 sword auras. Nietion was indeed a swordsman with the sword heart of heaven and earth. Kill! At this moment, Lan Zhuying let out a low roar. Her eyes were dark red, and she looked extremely violent. The azure sea reflecting the moon slashed down, and the void trembled as if it couldn't bear the terrible sword pressure and was about to collapse. Chapter 3575. You're dead. Come. Nietion's lips twitched as he sensed the boundless pressure of the sword. His eyes were not filled with fear, but a strong battle intent. Lan Zhuying was indeed powerful, but Nietion was fearless. He did not plan to use his heaven-defying strength. He did not plan to use the extreme demon seal or the earthly destruction spirit. He only planned to use his sword intent and martial body to defeat Lan Zhuying. If he couldn't resist this sword, he would accept it even if he lost. The icy blue beast was like a mountain, crushing downward as if it was going to devour the heavens and earth. The violent aura was getting closer and closer to Nietion. Bang! At that instant, the sword aura surrounding Nietion grew stronger. The sword intent condensed outside his body like a whirlpool, causing his aura to grow stronger. The 7 sword intents were like 7 long snakes that revolved around him, triggering the violent force contained within the sword intent. 9 limits of the starry sky, the 6th limit, sun destruction. In the next second, Nietion finally spoke. His eyes darkened as he raised the sword of sky in his hand. As the blade landed, a dark shadow of a sword appeared, leaving a dark mark in the sky. It was as if a dark beast had walked out from a bottomless abyss, trying to devour everything. At that moment, the crowd's eyes flickered as the shock in their hearts increased. It was unbelievable that Nietion was able to unleash such a terrifying force in an instant. Bang! In the next second, the icy blue beast and the dark shadow of the sword collided into each other, causing the sky to explode. The violent force was like a giant wave in a tsunami, destroying everything in its path. The crowd was stunned as they stared at the spiritual space. However, they could not see Nietion and Lan Zhuiying's figures. Under the impact of the terrifying force, the 2 figures were drowned in it. Bang, bang, bang. Chi, chi, chi. Terrifying powers clashed against each other, causing ear-piercing booms that filled the entire spiritual space. Waves of terrifying powers were like wild beasts that could devour and destroy everything. After a long while, the spiritual space finally became clear. When the wild force dispersed, a figure appeared in front of everyone. His whole body was covered in blood, but he was like a sharp sword, incomparably sharp, standing in the void. Nietion. Everyone's eyes trembled as they immediately recognized that figure. It was Nie Tian. In the end, the one who was still standing in the spiritual space was still Nie Tian. Impossible. In Ji Hao's spiritual space, a shrill voice was heard. Lan Zhuying seemed to have lost her mind. Her eyes were filled with killing intent, which was incomparably cold. She couldn't accept that she would lose to Nie Tian. Although she had already lost to Nie Tian once, she did not use her full strength at that time and treated it as a joke. But this time, she had truly lost to Nie Tian. I don't believe it. In the next second, Lan Zhuying let out a roar, as if she had lost her mind. Lan Zhuying! At this moment, Nie Tian's chi returned. He let out a low roar, and his eyes flickered. A wave of spiritual energy was released and landed directly on Lan Zhuiying's chi. Lan Zhuiying's body trembled slightly, and the redness in her eyes disappeared. She gradually calmed down. What's going on? After Lan Zhuiying calmed down, her beautiful eyes trembled slightly. She couldn't believe that she had just behaved like that. It's fine now. Nie Tian smiled faintly. Then, he suddenly turned around and locked his fierce eyes on the Wolf Emperor. Ing Sangxiong and Lan Zhuiying had both lost control. Nobody would believe that there was nothing strange in the spiritual space. I've said it before. The spiritual space has a certain influence on a cultivator's divine sense. The Wolf Emperor knew what Nie Tian was thinking. He smiled and said, "Perhaps Lan Zhuiying really wants to defeat you." The corner of Nie Tian's lips twitched when he heard the Wolf Emperor's words. He smiled and said, "You make it sound so easy, Lord Wolf Emperor." The Wolf Emperor smiled and did not speak further. "Your Highness, are you all right?" At that instant, a deep voice was heard. Then, a figure appeared beside Lan Zhuiying. He seemed extremely nervous. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at the man, and he exclaimed in surprise. He did not expect Yin Yang Elder to be here. It turned out that Yin Yang Elder had been here all along. He had merely been hiding and did not show himself. "I'm fine." Lan Zhuiying nodded slightly, indicating that she was fine. Yin Yang Elder's face darkened. He glared at the Wolf Emperor cold and said, "Lord Wolf Emperor, if anything happens to Her Highness, I, Zhou Yinshan, will never let you off." It was a threat, a blatant threat. Lan Zhuiying's identity was indeed not simple. Even Yin Yang Elder addressed her as Her Highness. Moreover, it seemed that Yin Yang Elder was secretly protecting Lan Zhuiying. Zhou Yinshan, it is not wise to threaten this emperor in Wolf Night City. The Wolf Emperor smiled coldly, and his eyes flashed with a cold light. It was obvious that he did not take Yin Yang Elder's threat to heart. "Wolf Emperor, you should know what kind of person I, Zhou Yinshan, am." The corners of Yin Yang Old Man's mouth twitched as he solemnly said, "His Highness's identity is not something you can imagine. If anything happens to His Highness, your evil Moon Wolf tribe will be erased from the seventh sacred world of cultivators." Many people in the seventh sacred world of cultivators knew that Yin Yang Elder came from the high paradise sky, a powerful force in a high-rank sacred world. From the way he addressed Lan Zhuiying and his attitude, one could guess that Lan Zhuiying was from the high paradise sky and had a very high status at that. The Wolf Emperor narrowed his eyes and said in a Lan Zhuiying, "Since Lady Lan has such a high status, she should not have come to participate in the Wolf Night battle." It seemed that he still did not accept Yin Yang Elder's threat. "You." Yin Yang Elder's face sank. Just as he was about to say something, he was stopped by Lan Zhuiying. The latter said, "Senior Brother Zhou, I am fine." Yin Yang Old Man frowned and nodded solemnly. He did not say anything else. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian could not help but frown, and his expression changed slightly. It was very strange that the Wolf Emperor did not care about Yin Yang Elder's threat at all. Could it be that Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf had a stronger backer? Could this backer be related to the Netherworld Emperor? At this time, the Wolf Emperor roared and loudly said, "The battle continues." The final winner of the battle between Lan Zhuiying and Nie Tian was Nie Tian. The next battle was between Qi Sha and Yin Liujia. Nie Tian, you are very lucky. Yin Liujia suddenly looked at Nie Tian and said with a cold smile, "But in the next round, you are dead. With that said, he directly entered his divine soul space with a thought. At this time, Chi-Sha was already waiting for him in the divine soul space. Niet Tan faintly smiled and murmured, "Humph, In Liojia, I'm afraid you will reach the next round." Chapter 3576. Extreme Killing Force. Everyone looked at the spiritual space with shining eyes. They were obviously looking forward to it. In the battle between Nie Tian and Lan Zhuiying, Nie Tian had an unexpected victory. What would be the result of this battle? Although Chi-Sha was ranked second only to Bodhi Seed, most people felt that In Liojia had a higher chance of winning. Many people did not understand why Chi-Sha had such a high ranking. Bodhi Seed was ranked first because he had the title of the leader of the Nine Wolves. But no one knew about Chi-Sha at all. It was as if he was an expert who appeared out of thin air. No one knew his origin. But In Liojia was different. He had the title of the Nine Wolves, and his previous performance was also very amazing. He had defeated Su Kuanga, who was also one of the Nine Wolves. Looking at Chi-Sha and In Liojia, Nie Tian's eyes flickered slightly as a strange smile appeared on his face. He knew Chi-Sha very well. He even saved Chi-Sha with his own hands. He knew that among the three demonic heart physiques, Chi-Sha was the strongest. But after Cher integrated with the heavenly sacred heart, it was not necessarily so. Cher had a very special position among the three demonic heart physiques. Although she was a good physique, she had integrated with the heavenly sacred heart. And the power of the heavenly sacred heart was not weaker than the heaven-punishing demon heart. Nie Tian believed that Cher could completely get rid of the control of the Emperor of the Netherworld with the power of the heaven-punishing demon heart. "You are Chi-Sha, right?" At this time, in the spiritual space, In Liojia looked at Chi-Sha with a cold face, looking very arrogant. It was obvious that he did not take Chi-Sha seriously. "Next move, bring out your strongest power." Chi-Sha twitched the corner of his mouth and said coldly. A cold intent filled the entire spiritual space, extremely chilling. At this moment, an extremely murderous aura covered the heaven and earth, as if to destroy everything in front of it. Feeling the murderous aura, In Liojia's face darkened and his eyes trembled. This kind of murderous aura made him feel a threat that penetrated deep into his divine soul. It was as if there was an invisible giant hand gripping him tightly, making it hard for him to breathe. Seized the chance to make one move. Just then, Chi-Sha spoke again. His cold, murderous intent spread out like tentacles. It was terrifying, arrogant. In Liojia's eyes darkened, and he let out a low roar. His aura erupted like a ferocious beast, trying to break through the shackles. At this moment, he already knew that the person standing in front of him was an extremely terrifying opponent. He had to go all out in order to have a chance. Boom! In the next moment, In Liojia's aura burst out like a landslide. However, no matter how strong his aura was, he could still feel the murderous aura enveloping him like an unbreakable cage of murderous intent. "You don't deserve to stand in front of me with only this level of strength." Chi-Sha looked at In Liojia and sneered coldly, his eyes bursting with killing intent. "Damn it!" In Liojia let out a low roar. Suddenly, his aura erupted crazily, causing the void to tremble violently. Waves of terrifying aura, like a giant beast that could swallow the sky, seemed to be able to destroy everything. What a strong aura! The crowd looked at the aura circulating around In Liojia's body with trembling eyes, horrified. "5 wolves go!" In the next moment, In Liojia roared like thunder. Suddenly, 5 giant wolves appeared behind him. An ice wolf that was like frost, a flame wolf that was like fire, a storm that was like a storm, a dark wolf that was like an abyss, and a golden wolf that was like a blazing sun. In Liojia seemed to have activated a terrifying seal in his body, forcibly condensing 5 giant wolves. The highest realm of the 7 wolves' ultimate kill could release 7 giant wolves at the same time. In Liojia could actually condense 5 giant wolves, which showed how strong he was. The power of 5 wolves? The corner of the Wolf Emperor's mouth twitched slightly when he saw this scene. He smiled faintly and murmured, "This power is very strong, but it's impossible to defeat Lord Chi-Sha. Kill!" Liujia let out a low roar, and then the 5 wolves behind him rushed out at the same time. Like 5 mountains, they pressed down on Chi-Sha. Trash! Chi-Sha's eyes narrowed slightly, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He spat out 2 extremely contemptuous words coldly. In the next moment, he stretched out his palm and clenched it slightly. Suddenly, the surging murderous aura in the void tightened like a net. Then, a shocking scene appeared. Bang! 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 A violent, muffled sound came from the spiritual space. The giant wolves seemed to be oppressed by an invisible force and directly collapsed in the air. Puff! Immediately, an extremely murderous force broke through the air and attacked Liujia. He didn't even have time to let out a final scream before his heart was directly penetrated and his figure disappeared. The extremely strange scene, made everyone's eyes tremble, and they were dumbfounded on the spot. They couldn't imagine what kind of power Chi-Sha had used to directly kill Liujia. It seemed that in the spiritual space, Chi-Sha was like the ruler there, controlling everything. Tian frowned at this time, and his expression changed slightly. He felt that Chi-Sha seemed to have a certain connection with the spiritual space. In that space, Chi-Sha's aura was much stronger. The reason why Chi-Sha could show such amazing combat strength had a lot to do with the spiritual space. At this time, Chi-Sha's divine soul returned. He glanced at Liujia coldly and didn't say a word. Liujia's eyes trembled, and he was obviously very afraid. His body was trembling. Only then did he know how terrifying Chi-Sha was. Tian, are you ready? At this time, Chi-Sha suddenly looked at Tian and asked coldly. Anytime. Tian smiled faintly, his face calm. Although Chi-Sha's killing method was very strange, Tian was not afraid. So far, he hadn't shown his ultimate combat strength. In the battle between Chi-Sha and Liujia, Chi-Sha won with an absolute advantage. And then, in the battle between Lan Zhuiying and Liujia directly admitted defeat. Maybe he was afraid of entering the spiritual space again, or maybe he was afraid of Lan Zhuiying's identity. At this time, the top 3 of the Wolf Knight contest were born: Linden, Chi-Sha, and Tian. The next battle was the final battle. At this time, the Wolf Emperor stepped out, glanced at Tian, and said lightly, "The battle of the top 3 will be decided by drawing lots." Linden, Chi-Sha, and Tian. The 3 of them stepped forward at the same time. The Wolf Emperor took out 3 battle lots and placed them in front of the 3. Linden was the first to step forward. He took the battle lot and opened it directly. There was only one word written on it: fight. Tian and Chi-Sha took the other 2 battle lots and opened them respectively. Tian's battle lot had only one word written on it: fight. The Bodhi Seed's banner, on the other hand, read, no battle. Chapter 3577. The Bodhi tree. A bitter smile appeared at the corner of Tian's mouth as he gazed at the Bodhi tree seed. Among the 3 of them, 7 kills was the luckier one of the 3. Next would be the battle between Tian and the Bodhi tree. Tian, I'll be waiting for you. At that moment, 7 kills suddenly looked at Tian. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile as he said in a deep voice, "Don't let me down." Tian smiled and didn't say anything. "You too, please." The Wolf King glanced at Tian and the Bodhi tree. Tian and the Bodhi seed nodded slightly. As a thought entered their minds, their souls appeared in their respective soul spaces. "Tian, I won't hold anything back in this battle," the Bodhi seed said with a cold expression, his deep voice filled with frosty, killing intent. "Go all out, Tian." Tian shook his head. "I will," Tian said with a calm smile on his face. At this moment, everyone looked at the 2 in the spiritual space and started discussing. "I didn't think that the leader of the 9 wolves, the Bodhi tree, is blind. Blind sword Bodhisattva. His eyes are blind, but his sword is not. Although he is blind, his sword intent is sharper than most swordsmen. The Bodhi tree is the leader of the 9 wolves with a cultivation of the 5th stage of heaven rhythm. You can imagine how strong he is. If Nyetian runs into him, I'm afraid he'll be defeated. The Bodhi tree was famous in the Wolf's Night Mountain, but not many people had seen him in person. Before, the Bodhi tree had been quiet and didn't show any outstanding performance. But everyone was still very confident in him. The title of the leader of the 9 wolves wasn't something that could be easily obtained. Plus, the evil Moon Wolf's people ranked the Bodhi tree first. This was enough to prove how strong he was. Buzz! At this moment, an azure long sword appeared in the Bodhi tree's hand. A deep sword hum was heard. It was like the cry of a crane, echoing through the entire spiritual space. What a sharp sword essence! Nyetian narrowed his eyes, and his expression changed. This was the first time he had seen the Bodhi seed use a sword. He hadn't expected the sword intent to be so sharp. Bodhi seed was only a swordsman at the 5th sky of sword essence, but his sword essence was even more terrifying than that of Lan Zhuiying at the 1st sky of Oracle. Kill! At this moment, the Bodhi seed roared in a low voice, after which he took a step forwards as the green lotus blind sword slashed out. A sharp killing intent whistled through the air as the sword's silhouette resembled an iceberg, exploding towards Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly. He took out the sky sword and thrust it forward. Bang! The 2 sword shadows collided with each other, and a muffled explosion rang out in the air. Instantly, sharp sword intent surged out in all directions, like a huge wave of swords that wanted to tear the heavens and earth apart. The next moment, Nyetian's eyes trembled. He retreated a few hundred meters before he managed to stabilize himself. However, several bloody wounds had appeared on his body. Furthermore, his wrist had actually split open and was dripping with blood. His sword essence is so domineering. Nyetian's face darkened. He was shocked. The Bodhi seed's sword essence was sharp and domineering. Moreover, the sword essence was filled with a strong, killing intent. The explosive power seemed to be able to destroy everything. Even a swordsman like Nyetian wouldn't be able to resist his sword intent. Nyetian, the sword in my hand, is called the Green Lotus Blind Sword. The sword skill that I cultivate is called the 9 skills of the Blind Sword. Under the 9 skills, I can destroy everything. If you only have this kind of sword essence, you won't be able to resist me. Show me your real strength. The Bodhi seed said coldly. Although his eyes were blind, he seemed to be able to see everything. Moreover, he could see more clearly than an ordinary person. Outside his body, streaks of violent sword essence surged and formed a storm of swords. It seemed like the space around him would be torn apart if he moved casually. Although the Bodhi seed spoke arrogantly, he was actually very surprised in his heart. His 9 skills of the sword essence could kill everything. He didn't expect that Nyetian would dare to fight him head-on. Furthermore, he was only slightly injured. He had to admit that he had underestimated Nyetian. Good. Nyetian's eyes darkened, and his lips curled into a sinister smile. With a low roar, the sword aura around his body exploded. The 2 saint souls in his body were activated at the same time. His sword principle realm instantly reached the 7th heaven of sword essence realm. Very good. This kind of battle is a little interesting. The Bodhi seed felt the sword essence around Nyetian. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. His entire person seemed cold and murderous. At this moment, it was as if he was no longer a person, but a sword that could kill everything in its path. Boom! In the next moment, the Linden Bodhi seed slashed out with his sword, and a cyan sword shadow appeared. Endless fierce sword intent rushed madly towards Nyetian like a colossal beast. Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly. The sword in the sky pierced the sky like a mad beast. It let out a cold sword cry, and then the sword shadow rushed out like a mad dragon. Boom! The 2 sword shadows faced Zhu Heng. In the void, there was an endless roar. Endless dazzling sword radiance surged as if it was going to annihilate the world. The next moment, the figures of Nyetian and the Bodhi seed retreated at the same time, avoiding the impact of the sword essence. His sword essence is too domineering. Nyetian stabilized his body. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he was secretly surprised. He had activated the double sacred souls, and his sword principle had been upgraded to the seventh heaven of sword essence. However, he still could not gain the upper hand when facing the Bodhi seed head-on. At this moment, he even felt a slight pain in his wrist, as if it was about to split open. The Bodhi seed's 9 extinction sword essence was extremely fierce and domineering. It was even more terrifying than those tyrannical bladesmen. Nyetian had seen many swordsmen who walked the Tao of swiftness and sharpness. It was the first time that he had seen such a domineering swordsman like the Bodhi seed. Nyetian, is this all you've got? This is too disappointing. The Bodhi seed smiled coldly and roared. Suddenly, the sword essence around his body became even more violent. The dazzling sword radiance shot out tens of thousands of meters, making him look like he was bathing in the sword essence. At this moment, Nyetian suddenly sensed an aura in the Bodhi seed's sword essence. His expression changed, and he said in surprise, "Thunder and lightning." That's right, there was an additional aura of thunder and lightning in the Bodhi seed's sword essence. It was very strange. Boom, boom, boom. The next moment, the Bodhi seed's sword essence became even more violent. The power of thunder and lightning struck the void as if it was going to annihilate heaven and earth. Under the stimulation of the power of thunder and lightning, the power of his sword essence became even more terrifying. Nyetian, can you still block the next sword strike? The Bodhi seed's face was cold. His pair of blind eyes made him look even more evil and cold. 9 extinction blind sword, purple thunder destruction. Then, the Bodhi seed's mouth twitched, and his whole body released a murderous aura. It seemed that the entire spiritual space had become his killing field. Chapter 3578. A palm strike. When the crowd saw what was happening in the spiritual space, they couldn't help but gasp. Their expressions changed, and they were shocked. The Bodhi seed's strength was too terrifying. The sword intent he released was incomparably domineering, capable of destroying everything in its path. Would Nyetian be able to withstand the purple thunder destruction? At this moment, even the Wolf Emperor and 7 kills couldn't help but worry for Nyetian, their eyes trembling. Sacred heaven-defying sword, heaven and human unity, Yang, Chen, sacrifice. At this moment, Nyetian's sword intent surged wildly, and a terrifying murderous aura circulated around him. Above the sword in the sky, a 10,000-meter-long sword aura flowed around the blade. The terrifying sword intent was like a violent demon that seemed to be able to devour the void. Boom! In the next moment, Nyetian let out a low roar, and a terrifying sword shadow whizzed out. The terrifying aura caused the void to tremble. Oomph! The Bodhi seed sneered and said disdainfully, "You want to fight me with such strength? What a joke!" The strength that Nyetian had displayed was terrifying, but it was impossible for him to fight against the purple thunder destruction. Is that so? At that moment, Nyetian let out a cold laugh and charged forward like a bolt of lightning. What is Nyetian trying to do? His crazy action made the crowd tremble, and they all cried out in surprise. At this moment, Nyetian was fighting against the Bodhi seed and dashed forward. Wasn't he courting death? The Bodhi seed's heart trembled. He was surprised by Nyetian's strange action. Could it be that Nyetian was going to fight him in close combat and compete with his martial body? Boom! At this moment, the sword shadow directly hit the purple thunder net. The void roared, and suddenly, a terrifying force of thunder and lightning rushed out and turned into thousands of tentacles that directly grabbed at Nyetian. Nyetian, it's impossible for you to pass through my purple lightning net. The corners of the Bodhi seed's mouth twitched as he sneered cold. He did not believe that Nyetian would be able to break through his purple lightning net with a single sword strike. At this moment, he was even more confident that Nietian would be killed by the purple thundersword intent. Really? Nietian laughed coldly once more. While he was in the air, a violent draconic chi gushed forth from his body. After that, a gigantic scarlet golden dragon appeared. Its gigantic body was incomparably frenzied as it dashed forward. Rumble. In the next instant, the giant dragon stirred the net of lightning, and the two powers of lightning clashed. Terrifying lightning spread for tens of thousands of meters, causing space to violently tremble as if it was about to be torn apart. The Bodhiseed's expression was somber as he frowned. Clearly, he had not expected Nietian to be able to unleash the power of Dragon Chi. Bang! At this moment, a violent muffled sound could be heard. The purple lightning net finally couldn't take it anymore, and a huge hole was torn in it. The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched. His figure instantly flew out like a ray of light, charging straight at the Bodhiseed. Courting death. The Bodhiseed's face darkened as he growled cold. The sword intent and killing intent around him were released crazily as he thrust out his palm in an attempt to kill Nietian. He had not expected that Nietian would be able to break through the purple lightning net, but he did not panic. He did not believe that Nietian's martial body would be stronger than his. Although the Bodhiseed was only a fifth-layer heavenly rhythm holy disciple, his martial body was stronger than many low-ranked holy masters. Nietian was only at the third-layer heavenly rhythm holy disciple. Charging straight at him was simply courting death. Bodhiseed, this round is finally over. Nietian smiled faintly as a strange light flickered in his eyes. At this moment, the Bodhiseed suddenly sensed a terrifying eye power circulating within Nietian's body. It was actually stimulating Nietian's martial body to become stronger. How is this possible? The sudden change made the Bodhiseed's face tremble as he screamed in shock. However, at that moment, Nietian's eyes had already taken on a bizarre shade of black. As he thrust his palm out, palm shadows whizzed out like gusts of wind, carrying an incomparably violent aura. Bang! In the next moment, the two palms collided and a muffled sound was heard as one of the palms shattered. Bang! Then, another muffled sound was heard as the Bodhiseed's body shook violently before it shattered and disappeared. Dead. The scene in front of them caused everyone's eyes to tremble violently. Their faces were filled with disbelief. They could not believe that Nietian had killed the Bodhiseed with a single palm strike. Originally, everyone thought that the battle had only just begun. They never thought that it would end like this. Countless people stood rooted to the ground, unable to react for a long time. Nietian's martial body is too terrifying. After a long time, everyone came back to their senses and looked at Nietian with shock and astonishment. No one had expected Nietian to be able to pass through the Bodhiseed's lightning net. And the strength of Nietian's martial body was even more unimaginable. With the Bodhiseed's strength, ordinary third-level heavenly charm cultivators would not even be able to get close to him. But Nietian was able to directly kill the Bodhiseed with his martial body. That was too terrifying. Nietian's gaze swept across the crowd, and he faintly smiled. With a thought, his divine soul returned. What kind of power did you use? At this moment, the Bodhiseed reacted and asked coldly with a murderous expression. He could not understand how Nietian could instantly increase his martial body to such a terrifying level. I power. Nietian smiled faintly and answered frankly. He knew that the Bodhiseed's martial body was very strong when he fought with him, so he used his godly demon body when he got close to the Bodhiseed. Under normal circumstances, Nietian's martial body was no match for the Bodhiseed. He did not want to fight with the Bodhiseed for too long, because he was focused on the next battle with Chi Sha. Therefore, he used his godly demon body to catch the Bodhiseed off guard and kill him with a palm strike. You're a cultivator with other pupils. The Bodhiseed's face was gloomy, and a faint sword intent surged around his body. He was obviously very angry. He was really unwilling to lose this battle. He had not even used his true strength when he was defeated by Nietian just like that. He did not even use the Bodhi bead. However, He was also lucky. After all, this was a battle in the divine soul space. If it had been a real battle, he would have been dead. You can say that. Yet Tion smiled faintly and did not deny it. His demon eye and heavenly punishment spirit rebel came from the godly demon embryo, so he was not sure if he was a cultivator with other pupils. The Bodhiseed's face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water, but he did not say anything. He had lost this battle. As such, Nye Tian had won. Next, he would face his last opponent, Qi Sha. Chapter 3579. Chapter 3574. Chapter 3574. A brutal massacre. The way Qi Sha looked at Nye Tian was cold, murderous, and strange. There was even a hint of scheming in his eyes, which made Nye Tian feel somewhat uneasy. When 7 Kills fought against Yin Liujia, Nye Tian had already found out that 7 Kills had some kind of connection with the spiritual space. In the spiritual space, 7 Kills' power would be greatly improved. Somehow, Nye Tian felt that there must be something hidden in the spiritual space. Come on. At this time, 7 Kills smiled coldly, and then his spiritual soul appeared in the spiritual space. Nye Tian nodded slightly. With a thought, he sent his soul into his soul space to confront Qi Sha. Nye Tian, you really didn't disappoint me. 7 Kills' eyes flashed with coldness. Maybe it was because his murderous intent was too strong. His eyes were like sharp blades that could directly kill people. Then I hope that you won't disappoint me too. Nye Tian smiled lightly and responded in a deep voice. His face was as calm as a deep pond. I will. 7 Kills sneered and then took a step forward. Suddenly, an enormous murderous intent was released from his body. Like an invisible giant hand, it instantly covered the entire spiritual space. It really is a ward. Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and he exclaimed in his heart. When 7 Kills fought against Yin Liujia released the power of the 5 wolves, but was killed by 7 Kills in a strange way. At that time, Nye Tian guessed that 7 Kills must have opened some kind of ward in the spiritual space. Now, facing 7 Kills, he sensed the murderous intent in the spiritual space and sensed the power of the ward, which made him sure that 7 Kills had indeed opened the ward. Nye Tian, facing the extreme kill ward, how long can you last? 7 Kills smiled coldly and asked directly. I can last until I defeat you. Nye Tian's lips twitched, and he responded in a deep voice. At this moment, he felt that 7 Kills had become an abyss of murderous intent. His every move would affect the surrounding murderous intent. Really? Qi Sha laughed coldly. Then he moved and stepped out. Instantly, an extremely sharp killer's intent condensed into a blade that attacked Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. His figure instantly retreated a few meters to the side, avoiding the extreme killing blade. In the blink of an eye, he saw the extreme killing blade brush past his chest. The sharp aura left a horrifying wound on his body. Yet Tian steadied himself, and his heart couldn't help but tremble. Fortunately, he had dodged in time. Otherwise, if he had been hit by the extreme killing edge, his heart would definitely have been pierced. At that moment, he could also sense that the killing intent in his surroundings was exerting an enormous pressure on him, causing his speed to slow down significantly. Fortunately, his perception was far stronger than that of the average warrior. Coupled with the eternal night demon fox's presence, he was able to predict Qi Sha's attack in time. Very good. Qi Sha's eyes narrowed slightly, and his lips twitched. He said, Nye Tian, your strength has exceeded my expectations. But that's nothing. It just makes this battle more interesting. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire spiritual space was filled with a bone-chilling killer's intent. Is that so? Nye Tian faintly smiled and said, in the spiritual space, you are indeed strong. But such strength is not enough to kill me. You are very confident, but this level of confidence will not save you. Qi Sha sneered and slightly raised his hand. Then, several surges of killer's intent gushed out, and in the air, several blades of extreme killing appeared. Like arrows released from a bow, they whizzed towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He could clearly hear the ear-piercing screeches of the blades of extreme killing, like the knell of the god of death. In the next second, a pair of astral wings appeared on Nietion's back. His silhouette stepped back in the air, barely dodging the blades of extreme killing. However, a few more wounds appeared on his body. His entire body was now covered in blood. These blades of extreme killing were far too terrifying. Being hit directly by one of them would be fatal. Nietion, your perception is much stronger than others. But how long can you last? Chisha grinned coldly. His hands moved in the air, and countless blades of extreme killing appeared, piercing through the air. Wretch! 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 In the air, the sound of flesh being sliced could be heard. Bloody wounds appeared on Nietion's body, turning him into a man of blood. This! The crowd's eyes trembled as they gasped. They were astonished by the horrifying scene before them. In front of Chisha, Nietion couldn't even fight back. The fight in the spirit space was simply a massacre. Nietion, do you still have the strength to fight back? In his spiritual space, Chisha growled coldly. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. I'm not dead yet. You haven't won this battle yet. Nietion said with a cold smile. Although he appeared to be covered in blood, as if he was heavily injured, in reality, he wasn't seriously injured. At least, his injuries weren't fatal. You're courageous, but you can't win this battle. Chisha grinned coldly and raised his hands. Instantly, a terrifying aura appeared in the air and enveloped Nietion. Nietion suddenly felt the killer's intent, and his face froze. However, before he could react, his entire body was wrapped up by the killer's intent, and he couldn't move. Oh no! Nietion frowned, and his face changed color. He screamed in his heart. Chisha had set up a barrier in his spiritual space and gained the absolute advantage. Inside this space, he was the absolute ruler. Nietion, accept your death. 7 kills sneered. Then, a terrifying killing intent surged out of his body. Next, a terrifying blade of extreme killing appeared in the void and whizzed towards Nietion. Nietion felt the killer's intent, and his pupils shrunk. He was surrounded by the killer's intent and couldn't move at all. He could only wait to be killed by the blade. In the blink of an eye, Nietion was in a hopeless situation. Inside the array of extreme killing, nobody is my opponent. 7 kills sneered arrogantly. He seemed to have gone mad. It was as if he could already see the scene of Nietion being killed. Nietion is done for. At the same time, everyone's eyes were shaking and their hearts were shaking. What was happening inside the spiritual space made everyone believe that Nietion was dead for sure. In this hopeless situation, Nietion was dead for sure. However, what happened in the next moment was beyond everyone's expectations. Wretch! Nietion's expression flickered slightly as a stream of dark eye power surged out of his body and condensed into a sharp blade in the air, whistling through the air. Chapter 3580. Monstrous Killing Intent, huh? The sudden turn of events made Chisha's eyes widen in shock. At this moment, he actually felt a terrifying pressure. However, he reacted very quickly. His pupils suddenly contracted, and a tremendous wave of eye power surged out, forming an extreme killing vortex in front of him, and directly devoured the eye power blade that was coming at him. Bang! At the same time, a muffled sound rang out. Nietion forcefully broke free from the killing intent. Damn it! 7 kills frowned and growled coldly. His eyes were filled with murderous intent, as if he wanted to eat someone alive. He had never imagined that Nietion would still have the strength to fight back at this moment. However, the eye power that Nietion had just released actually made him feel extremely threatened. If he had reacted any slower, it was very likely that he would have been killed on the spot. Chisha, your strength is only SOSO. Nietion smiled faintly. His body shook, and the bloodstains on his body were washed away. Sword intent surged around him, extremely sharp. You still dare to be arrogant in the face of death. Chisha roared in a low voice. After that, he moved. The killing intent around him condensed into a storm that was incomparably sharp, stirring up the space around him. It was as if the heaven and earth were about to be destroyed. Extreme killing chi was the extreme of killing. That kind of violent and overbearing aura was a great deterrent to martial artists. However, 7 Kill's control and understanding of this power was far from enough. Otherwise, the killing intent he released would have been enough to kill Nie Tian. Come! Nie Tian's eyes darkened, and he no longer had any scruples. The power in his eyes was released in a frenzy, attacking the martial body and activating the celestial demon body. Very good. 7 Kills looked at Nie Tian and felt the terrifying aura he was releasing. He smiled coldly and said, "This is the Nie Tian I know. Let's have a good fight." Kill. In the next moment, Chi Sha growled, and the storm of killing intent around him moved. A terrifying aura rolled out and destroyed everything in its path. Nie Tian frowned when he felt the strangling power coming towards him. However, there was no fear on his face, only a strong desire to fight. 9 limits of the starry sky, sun annihilation. With a roar, the sky's sword streaked across the sky, causing the void to tremble. In an instant, a terrifying sword shadow shot out. The powerful pressure caused the surrounding void to sink. Boom! In the next moment, the sword shadow collided with the storm of killing intent. A terrifying rumbling sound rang out in the air. In an instant, a terrifying violent force crazily rampaged in all directions. The heavens and earth were in chaos, as if doomsday had arrived. What a terrifying pair! The crowd's eyes quivered intensely, looking at the scene in the spiritual space in disbelief. The combat strength of Nie Tian and Chi Sha was too terrifying. It was hard to believe that the battle in front of them was between 2 heavenly charm saint disciples. Whether it was Nie Tian or Chi Sha, their combat strength was far beyond that of ordinary heavenly mandate saint masters. Especially Nie Tian. When he activated the celestial demon body and the 2 saint souls at the same time, he was probably strong enough to threaten some high-level heavenly mandate warriors. Bang! At this time, a muffled sound came from the spiritual space. Chi Sha's figure flew backward, leaving a bloody trail in the air. Nie Tian's figure also retreated hundreds of meters, but he stood steadily, with a faint trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. How is this possible? Chi Sha steadied himself, his eyes suddenly narrowed, and he cried out in shock. He couldn't believe that Nie Tian could hurt him in a head-on fight in the supreme kill boundary. Chi Sha, how long can you last in your current state? Nie Tianling sneered, and then moved. The sky sword drew a dazzling sword light in the air, and a sword shadow slashed out like a mountain, blasting toward Chi Sha. At this time, Nie Tian had activated the celestial demon body and the 2 saint souls at the same time, which had forced his martial body to the limit. His current strength was very strong, but he couldn't maintain it for long. Therefore, he had to cut the Gordian knot and quickly end the battle in front of him. Damn it! Chi Sha felt the oppressive force coming toward him. He growled and slapped out with his palm. The extreme kill storm appeared, hitting the sword shadow, but it only blocked it for a moment. The sword shadow was extremely violent, and the power contained in it was very terrifying. It directly pressed toward him. Bang! With a muffled sound, Chi Sha flew backward again, and a bloody mark appeared in the air. How did Nie Tian become so strong? Everyone's eyes trembled, looking at the spiritual space in disbelief. They didn't understand how Nie Tian, who was completely suppressed just now, could suddenly become so terrifying. Chi Sha steadied his body, and his whole body was already dripping with blood. He roared like a crazy beast, and his eyes suddenly became very strange, like an abyss of killing intent, releasing a terrifying murderous aura. Extreme kill demon eyes. Nie Tian's eyes slightly froze, and his expression changed, and he couldn't help but frown. Chi Sha used the extreme kill demon eyes again. It was obvious that he was going to fight to the death. Boom! At this time, The murderous intent around Chi was extremely violent. His whole body was like a murderous storm, and his sharp chi strangled everything. Ghost Emperor, where is the boundary eye of the extreme kill formation? Nietian felt the Sha's chi, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and he asked in a deep voice. At this moment, Sha was too terrifying. Even Nietian, who was in the state of the extreme kill formation, felt a strong threat. With his current state, there was no way he could resist Sha's attack, unless he used the Earth Destruction Star Soul. However, if he used the Earth Destruction Star Soul on Sha, it would be a bit of a waste. If he could find the boundary eye of the extreme kill formation, it would be much easier to break the formation and then defeat Sha. If you want to break the extreme kill formation, you have to kill him. The Ghost Emperor's eyes trembled slightly, and he replied in a low voice. Nietian frowned, and his expression changed. He immediately realized that Sha was the boundary eye of the extreme kill formation. If he wanted to break the extreme kill formation, he had to kill Sha. It seemed that Nietian had underestimated the extreme kill formation. Could it be that I have to use the Earth Destruction Star Soul? Nietian's eyes darkened slightly. He could feel that the murderous aura on Sha's body was even more terrifying, and his murderous intent was monstrous, blasting everything. It seemed that outside of Sha's body, there was an extreme kill demon shadow. He frowned, and with a thought, he was ready to use the Earth Destruction Star Soul. If Sha attacked again, he would use the Earth Destruction Star Soul. The extreme battle was about to start. Sha enough. At this time, a low voice suddenly sounded, and then a figure appeared in the sky. Your Highness Wolf. The Wolf Emperor frowned, looked at the person, and exclaimed. Chapter 3581. The Emperor of the Underworld appears, Lian Jiufeng. Nietian's pupils shrank when he heard the voice. He looked at the newcomer. He hadn't expected Lian Jiufeng to appear at this time. Jiufeng, 7 kills, was stunned as well. He looked at Lian Jiufeng with trembling eyes. He was clearly very surprised. Everyone was stunned by Lian Jiufeng's sudden appearance. 7 kills. This battle ends here. Lian Jiufeng's eyes flashed with a strange light as he said coldly. Ends here. 7 kills. Eyes darkened. He asked coldly, what do you mean? You've lost. Nietian is the leader of Wolf Knight. Lian Jiufeng's eyes darkened slightly. He said casually, but his words were filled with undefiable dominance. You want me to admit defeat? 7 kills. Pupils shrank as he growled. Killing intent surged madly from his body like sharp blades. The surrounding space was filled with sharp howls. Nietian was stunned when he heard Lian Jiufeng's words. He hadn't thought that Lian Jiufeng would come here to ask 7 kills to admit defeat. Yes. Lian Jiufeng looked at 7 kills and nodded. He appeared very calm. Impossible, Sha growled. Like an enraged beast, his entire body was filled with a terrifying murderous intent. He could lose to Nietian, but he could not admit defeat. Everyone else was stunned as well. They looked strangely at Lian Jiufeng. The battle between Nietian and 7 kills was the final battle of the Wolf Knight struggle. Lian Jiufeng wanted 7 kills to admit defeat. This was a joke. This is an order from the Emperor of the Underworld. Lian Jiufeng ignored everyone else. His eyes were cold and dark as he stared at 7 kills. 7 kills. Pupils shrank. He was very shocked. The Emperor of the Underworld had ordered him to admit defeat. Was the Emperor of the Underworld going to give the leader of Wolf Knight to Nietian? 7 kills. The battle is over. It ends here, Lian Jiufeng said indifferently when he saw the stunned 7 kills. No. But at this moment, Sha suddenly roared and his killing intent burst out. The killing intent covered the entire spiritual space. That kind of killing intent was extremely terrifying. Nietian frowned. He didn't expect Sha to disobey the Emperor of the Underworld's order just to kill him. 7 kills. How dare you defy the Emperor of the Underworld? Lian Jiufeng growled as his eyes trembled. So what if I disobey? I must defeat Nietion. 7 kills roared. The murderous aura around him was like a storm that was piercing to the ears. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was to defeat Nietion. Even if he had to disobey the Underworld Emperor, he would not hesitate to do so. Have you lost your mind? Lion Jiofeng growled. His entire body surged with the power of golden flames as his eyes turned murderous. Your Highness Lang Zi. The Wolf Emperor was stunned by the scene before him. He finally reacted and turned to look at Lion Jiofeng in panic. He seemed a little afraid of Lion Jiofeng. 7 kills has lost this battle. Remove your spiritual space. Lion Jiofeng abruptly turned to look at the Wolf Emperor and said coldly, "This." The Wolf Emperor was stunned and completely panicked. I said remove your spiritual space. Lion Jiofeng's eyes were extremely dark as he roared. He was clearly furious. Yes, the Wolf Emperor's eyes trembled. He was actually very afraid of Lion Jiofeng. He agreed and removed his spiritual space immediately. Nietion and 7 kills divine souls immediately returned to their martial bodies. But at this time, 7 kills seemed to have gone mad. His killing intent surged wildly in the air like a tidal wave. It was extremely terrifying and seemed to want to devour everything. Stop, 7 kills. Lion Jiofeng frowned and roared. Even after removing his spiritual space, 7 kills still did not stop. My spiritual space is gone. That's exactly what I wanted. 7 kills' eyes were bloodshot as killing intent surged from his body. He stared at Nietion and said, "Nietion, let's fight for real." Nietion's eyebrows furrowed. He could tell that even Qi Sha seemed to be affected by his spiritual space and had lost control of his soul awareness. Boom! At that moment, 7 kills released his killing intent, forming ripples of killing intent in the air. The extreme killing boundary appeared. What a terrifying killing intent! Everyone's eyes trembled as they felt the terrifying killing intent surging in the air. They were shocked to the extreme. Before, they had only seen Qi Sha's murderous intent in their spirit space, but now they could clearly feel it. The murderous intent in the air was as cold as ice, which could penetrate into their bones. No one had expected 7 kills killing intent to be so terrifying. Nietion looked at 7 kills and frowned. The current situation was even worse than before. Just now, in the spiritual space, even if the two of them used their ultimate moves, it would only determine the winner. But now, under normal circumstances, after using their ultimate moves, it would be a matter of life and death. The next moment, Nietion's eyes darkened as he thought to himself, "There's no other way. I can only fight with brute force." Now that 7 kills was almost out of control, he could only use the devastating Star Soul. With 7 kills strength, even in the extreme kill formation, it was impossible for him to fight against the devastating Star Soul. Nietion felt the power of the devastating Star Soul and was shocked. When the devastating Star Soul was released in an instant, it was probably enough to kill a Saint Master at the peak of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. Nietion, go to hell. At this moment, 7 kills' eyes were filled with killing intent. He growled, and the killing intent around him reached its peak. He took a step forward and struck with his palm. Suddenly, the terrifying killing intent rolled out and rushed toward Nietion. Nietion's eyes narrowed. He suddenly felt the fierce aura coming toward him, as if there were countless sharp blades tearing through the void. He moved his mind, and the devastating Star Soul sensed it. Star runes surged crazily. Stop! However, at the critical moment, a deep voice suddenly rang out. Boom! Immediately, a huge force appeared in the void, pressing down on the world as if it was about to collapse. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly, and then the star runes around him retracted, and the devastating Star Soul returned in time. At the same time, the huge force fell, but like a spring breeze and rain, it easily dissolved 7 kills' attack. Then a figure in black appeared in the sky, like a dark vortex, standing coldly in the sky. Emperor of the Underworld, Nietion suddenly looked up at the blurry figure. Although he could not see the face clearly, he was very sure that the person who came was the Emperor of the Underworld. Emperor of the Underworld. Seven Kill's eyes trembled, and his face suddenly changed. He screamed and then knelt down. Chapter 35:82. Chapter 35:77. The Path of the Heavenly Wolf, Emperor of the Underworld. The Wolf Emperor knelt. Everyone else in the demonic moon wolf cried out in unison and knelt down. This scene caused Nyetion's eyes to widen, and he exclaimed with a confused expression, He could understand why Seven Kills would kneel to the Wolf Emperor. After all, Seven Kills and the Wolf Emperor had a superior relationship. Moreover, Seven Kills had publicly acknowledged the Emperor of the Underworld. That was why he was kneeling. But why would the Wolf Emperor, a supreme expert of the demonic moon wolf, kneel to the Emperor of the Underworld? Wasn't the Wolf Emperor the highest existence in the demonic moon wolf? Nyetion was confused. He looked at the Emperor of the Underworld with a strange expression. But in the next moment, something even more shocking happened. He scanned the Wolf Emperor with his divine sense and found that the latter's strength had reached level 9 of heavenly righteousness. Level 9 of heavenly righteousness was the peak of the holy Monarch realm. He was only one step away from the Paramount Sage realm. How is this possible? Nyetion roared in his heart. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He had learned from Lian Jiufeng and Seven Kills that the Emperor of the Underworld had become a sage in the same realm as him, less than a month. In other words, the Emperor of the Underworld had only become a sage in a month or two. In a month or two, he had gone from a low-level holy disciple to a peak holy monarch at level 9 of heavenly righteousness. This speed could no longer be described as monstrous. It was indescribably monstrous. Even someone as monstrous as Nyetion was only at level 3 of heavenly charm. He had relied on various fortuitous encounters and the power of the heart of the sky. Then how did the Emperor of the Underworld rise from a low-level holy disciple to a peak holy monarch in such a short time? What happened to the Emperor of the Underworld? What was the Emperor of the Underworld right now? Why did the mighty Wolf Emperor have to kneel before him? One question after another haunted Nyetion's mind, making him feel as if his thoughts were a tangled mess. Seven Kills. This battle is over. The duel between you and Nyetion is not now. At this moment, the Emperor of the Underworld spoke up. His entire body was hidden in the darkness, and he seemed to be looking at Qi Sha as he said calmly. His voice was very calm, but every word he uttered was filled with an oppressive aura that made one shudder. Yes, Seven Kills nodded, but he was already drenched in cold sweat. Wolf Emperor, Nyetion is the winner of this battle. He is the leader of the Wolf Knight. The Emperor of the Underworld said to the Wolf Emperor, ignoring Qi Sha. Yes. The Wolf Emperor hurriedly nodded. He remained kneeling, not even daring to raise his head. The others looked at the Emperor of the Underworld from afar. They felt strange, but they didn't dare to make sound. They didn't even dare to breathe heavily. Just by standing there, the Emperor of the Underworld exuded a great pressure. It was as if he was a mountain that everyone else could only look up to from the foot of the mountain. Nyetion, after you become the leader of the Wolf Knight, you will walk the path of the Heavenly Wolf. I will wait for you at the end of the path of the Heavenly Wolf, the Emperor of the Underworld said indifferently as he focused his gaze on Nyetion. All right. Nyetion nodded slightly. He maintained a calm expression on his face. Seven Kills, Jiufeng, let's go. The Emperor of the Underworld nodded and left. Lian Jiufeng and Qi Sha exchanged a glance and hurriedly followed. The Wolf Emperor and the others only stood up a long time after the three Emperors of the Underworld had disappeared. Everyone let out a sigh of relief, but their faces were still filled with unconcealable shock. Originally, everyone thought that the Wolf Emperor was the person with the highest status in the celestial moon wolf. However, the Emperor of the Underworld's sudden appearance had overturned their beliefs. It was as if the Emperor of the Underworld was the strongest person in the celestial moon wolf. The Wolf Emperor sucked in a deep breath and calmed down. Then, he didn't say much and simply announced the end of the Wolf Knight struggle. Then he fixed his gaze on Yetion and the others and said, "Everyone, please come with me." Yetion and the other lords of the Blue Wolves nodded slightly and left with the Wolf Emperor. A while later, Yetion and the others appeared in the great hall of the Heavenly Wolf Palace in Wolf Night City. The Wolf Emperor sat at the head of the hall, while Yetion, Lan Zhuing, and the others stood on either side of him. Congratulations on becoming the Lords of the Blue Wolves for the Wolf Night struggle. The Wolf Emperor had completely calmed down by now. A faint smile hung on his face as he swept his gaze across Yetion and the others. He said very politely, "Lord Wolf Emperor is too polite." Yetion responded on behalf of the Lords of the Blue Wolves with a smile. He was the leader of the Wolf Night struggle, the leader of the 9 Lords of the Blue Wolves. Therefore, he was the one with the most authority among everyone present. Following that, the Wolf Emperor chatted casually with Yetion and the others for a while before he officially entered the topic. "Everyone, do you know about the Serious Path?" The Serious Path? Liugia spoke at this time. He was surprised and asked, "Could it be the legendary forbidden area of the evil moon wolf?" "Yes." The Wolf Emperor's eyes slightly narrowed as he looked at Liugia in surprise. He faintly smiled and said, "I didn't expect little friend Ian to know about the Serious Path." "Lord Wolf Emperor, you must be joking. I only heard about it from Master and only know about the existence of the Serious Path. As for what's inside, I have no idea." Liugia bowed slightly, looking very cautious. The Wolf Emperor nodded and said with a smile, "The Serious Path is indeed the forbidden area of the evil moon wolf. Under normal circumstances, the Serious Path is only open to the previous generations of Wolf Emperors. This time, in order to welcome the return of His Majesty the Netherworld Emperor, the evil moon wolf specially chose 9 Azure Wolf Lords and allowed you to enter the Serious Path." "Really?" Liugia's eyes trembled, a trace of unconcealable excitement on his face. "Of course." The Wolf Emperor smiled faintly. The others all looked excited at this time. They were obviously looking forward to entering the Serious Path. In the Night Wolf Mountain, there was a legend about the Serious Path. Rumor has it that the Serious Path has 9 kinds of ancient forbidden forces, which were very terrifying. If one could obtain any one of these 9 kinds of ancient forbidden forces, it would be enough for a cultivator to set foot on the peak of martial arts. Yetion's reaction at this time was very calm. He didn't know what the Serious Path was, nor did he care. What he cared about was that he wanted to walk to the end of the Serious Path and see the Netherworld Emperor. "Lord Wolf Emperor, rumor has it that the Serious Path has 9 kinds of ancient forbidden forces. I wonder if it's true?" At this time, Liugia couldn't help but ask cautiously with trembling eyes. When the others heard his words, their eyes blazed as they stared at the Wolf Emperor, waiting for the latter's answer. Chapter 3583. Chapter 3578. Heavenly Wolf. Heavenly Wolf's 9 stars. Everyone exclaimed in surprise when they heard the Wolf King's words. So the 9 ancient forbidden powers of the path of the Heavenly Wolf were called Heavenly Wolf's 9 stars. "Lord Wolf King, what kind of power is Heavenly Wolf's 9 stars?" Liugia's eyes were burning with excitement as he asked. Heavenly Wolf's 9 stars is a power left behind in the ancient times. Legend has it that it was formed by the bloodline power of 9 peak divine ancestors in the early ancient times, the Wolf King said with a faint smile. The bloodline power of a peak divine ancestor. Everyone was shocked. The heavenly martial divine ancestor was at the peak of the exalted saint realm. It was hard to imagine how strong a peak divine ancestor was. Even if the bloodline power was weakened, it was still very terrifying. This kind of power could indeed be called an ancient forbidden power. "Lord Wolf King, can we get the Heavenly Wolf's 9 stars?" Liang Gui couldn't help asking. "Since the path of the Heavenly Wolf is open to you, you can take away any power you get from it," the Wolf King said with a calm smile, but there was a strange look in his eyes. Yetion keenly captured the Wolf Emperor's expression, and his heart sank as he had a bad premonition. Since the Heavenly Wolf's 9 stars was an ancient forbidden power, How could the evil moon, heavenly wolf's people, let Nyation and the others take it away so easily? Nyation vaguely sensed the aura of a scheme. However, the heavenly wolf's 9 stars is a very powerful power. Ordinary cultivators can't fuse with it. It won't be easy for you to get the heavenly wolf's recognition, the Wolf King said with a faint smile. Everyone nodded, but their eyes were still blazing. Clearly, they were very confident in themselves. Lord Wolf King, can you tell us what the heavenly wolf's 9 stars are? At this moment, Bodhi Seed, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. He looked calm, but there was a trace of evil aura on his face. Of course. The wolf monarch smiled faintly and nodded. The heavenly wolf 9 celestial stars are 9 different kinds of energy. They are called heaven celestial, earth celestial, human celestial, yang celestial, moon celestial, star celestial, profound celestial, yellow celestial, and emperor celestial. Upon hearing the wolf emperor's words, everyone's eyes began to tremble again, and their faces were filled with unconcealable excitement. However, at that moment, the Bodhi Seed frowned and continued to ask, Lord Wolf Emperor, I wish to know, which of the 9 celestial wolves is the strongest? The heavenly wolf's 9 moons are all different, and their emphasis is also different. Their strength is almost the same. The Wolf King looked at the Bodhi Seed and knew what the latter was thinking. He smiled faintly and said, However, there is one Lang Chun who is far stronger than the other 8. He is called Sovereign Lang Chun. Which one? Everyone's eyes trembled as they cried out in unison. Emperor Chun. The corner of the wolf emperor's mouth twitched. He glanced at the 8 people and said with a smile, Regardless of who among the 8 of you, as long as you can fuse with the monster emperor star, your strength will break through at least 3 stages. Moreover, your martial arts foundation will also improve because of the monster emperor star. In the future, your martial arts achievements will easily reach the level of the sky martial divine ancestor. Divine ancestor. Everyone's eyes were burning with eagerness and admiration. All the martial artists in the all-heaven sacred world, regardless of whether they were in a low-grade sacred world or a high-grade sacred world, desired to step into the divine ancestor realm. However, the sky martial divine ancestor realm was the strongest realm of the supreme sacred world. In the entire all-heaven sacred world, the number of martial artists in the divine ancestor realm was 1 in a billion. It was already very good for ordinary martial artists to step into the sage realm. Even those geniuses could not break through the shackles of the sage Tianyi realm. After the sage Tianyi realm was the king sage realm, and the heavenly tribulation realm had to bear the power of the heavenly tribulation. Many cultivators have been killed by the power of heavenly tribulation when they were trying to break through to the heavenly tribulation realm because they hadn't made enough preparations. The sky martial divine ancestor realm was the dream of every martial artist. Everyone wanted to step into it. However, it was a pity that only the most monstrous geniuses could break through the sky martial divine ancestor realm. The power of the monster emperor star could not only improve the martial artist's strength instantly, but could also improve the martial arts foundation. Such power was too tempting. It turns out that the power of the monster emperor star is so powerful. No wonder teacher wants it. In Liujia glanced at the wolf emperor and the others and thought to himself. He participated in the wolf night battle for the monster emperor star. The person who really wanted the monster emperor star was his teacher, Huang Lang. However, after hearing what the wolf emperor said, In Liujia's mind had changed. If he could get the monster emperor star, he would, of course, integrate it himself. He would never give it to Huang Lang. Moreover, he felt that Huang Lang did not even know what kind of power the monster emperor star was. Among the 9 stars, the monster emperor star is the strongest. It also has the highest requirements for martial artists. If you want to get the monster emperor star, you have to know your own strength. The wolf emperor's lips curled into a faint smile as he looked at the young cultivators before him and said in a deep voice, Lord Wolf Emperor, how much weaker are the other wolf emperors compared to the monster emperor stars? Ming Feng looked at the wolf emperor and suddenly asked. The other wolf emperors, although weaker than the monster emperor stars, are still very powerful. They can also improve your strength in an instant and also improve your martial arts foundation. The wolf emperor nodded and said faintly, appearing very patient. Everyone nodded one after another, and their expressions became even more enthusiastic. Obtaining one of the heavenly wolf 9 stars would be a great fortune. Lord Wolf Emperor, since the heavenly wolf 9 stars is so powerful, why didn't the wolf emperor fuse with the demonic moon heavenly wolf? Nyetian suddenly said with a faint smile and looked at the wolf emperor with a burning gaze. The wolf emperor frowned, and his face slightly stiffened. He obviously did not expect that Nyetian would suddenly ask him such a question. The heavenly wolf 9 stars can only be found by chance. The wolf emperor calmed down a little and said, although this emperor knows that the heavenly wolf 9 stars is in the heavenly wolf road, I have never found it. What do you mean? The others couldn't help but be stunned when they heard the wolf emperor's words. If they entered the heavenly wolf road and couldn't even find the heavenly wolf 9 stars, then what was the point of entering? The heavenly wolf 9 stars is indeed in the heavenly wolf road, but whether you can appear or not depends on whether you meet the conditions of the 9 stars. The wolf emperor frowned and said, if your talent is good enough, the heavenly wolf 9 stars will automatically appear. Everyone frowned and was stunned for a moment, not knowing what to say. The powerful wolf emperor had entered the heavenly wolf road before, but no one had seen the heavenly wolf 9 stars. Those who could become the wolf emperor were naturally not weak in talent and strength. Even they couldn't draw out the heavenly wolf 9 stars. Could they do it? At this moment, everyone's expression instantly changed from excitement to unsightly. It was as if the wolf emperor had drawn a cake for them that could only be seen, not eaten. Chapter 3584. Chapter 3579. Chapter 3579. Conspiracy Aura. Underworld Emperor, help us? When everyone heard the wolf emperor's words, their originally dull eyes instantly trembled. After they reacted, they cried out in astonishment. The wolf emperor said that the underworld emperor would help them draw out the heavenly wolf Jochin. This sounded a bit unreal and unbelievable. None of the 8 people present were evil moon wolf's people. If the underworld emperor could really draw out the heavenly wolf Jochin, why would he let them fuse? Everyone had seen the underworld emperor, that mysterious dark shadow, no matter how they looked at it. He did not look like someone who was willing to help others. Yes, the underworld emperor will help you. The wolf emperor looked at everyone and nodded. Why? Nyetian was very calm at this time. He looked at the wolf emperor and asked, you are the green wolf lords chosen for the wolf night competition. Is it strange that the underworld emperor will help you? The wolf emperor frowned. He looked at Nyetian with an unconcealable hostility. He did not like Nyetian's question. Is that all? The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched. He laughed and did not say anything else. The eyes of the others flickered. Some were worried, some were excited. The 8 of them were all martial Dao geniuses. None of them were stupid. In the world of martial Dao, the strong were always respected. The underworld emperor was an expert, but he would not help Nyetian and the others for no reason. The underworld emperor's generous action made the ominous premonition in Nyetian's heart increase. Lord Wolf Emperor, if we fuse with Wolf Chun, do we have to join Evil Moon Wolf? At this time, Su Kuanga asked with a gloomy gaze. No need. The Wolf Emperor smiled faintly and said, this emperor said, since you entered the heavenly wolf road, anything you obtain inside belongs to you. You can take it away unconditionally. Thank you, Lord Wolf Emperor. Su Kuanga nodded slightly and thanked him, but his expression was obviously not good. The more tempting something was, the bigger the trap behind it. Evil Moon Wolf seemed to have dug a trap for Nyetian and the others, waiting for them to jump in. More importantly, Nyetian and the others seemed to have no other choice. Even though they knew it was a trap, they still had to jump in. All right, everyone, you can all take a rest in the Heavenly Wolf Palace. In 3 days, I will personally lead you all into the Heavenly Wolf Path, said the Wolf Emperor. He stood up and gestured for everyone to return. However, They could only stay in the serious manner and could not leave. Then, under the guidance of the Sky Wolf Guards, Nyation and the others arrived at their own resting areas. In the room, Nyation sat quietly, thinking about something. Everything that had happened over the past few days was just too strange. The Netherworld Emperor, 7 kills, and Lian Jiufeng in particular seemed to be completely different from before. He was anxious to know exactly what had happened to the three of them. Nyation, I'm afraid that the Wolf Emperor has some ulterior motives for letting you guys enter the Celestial Wolf's path. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice sounded. I know. Nyation smiled bitterly and said, I've already come this far. Even if the Sea of Purgatory is right in front of me, I have no choice but to continue. The Ghost Emperor nodded and said no more. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Nyation walked out of the room. His aura was much sharper than before. He looked even stronger and sharper than before. He had already made ample preparations for the Celestial Wolf path. He would face whatever came next calmly. A while later, Nyation and the others arrived at the Great Hall. The Wolf Emperor was already waiting for them. Everyone, let's go. The Wolf Emperor did not waste any time. He immediately led Nyation and the others out of the Great Hall. After that, they left the serious manor and soon arrived at a remote valley in Wolf's Night Mountain. The entrance to the Celestial Wolf Path is inside the valley, the Wolf Emperor said with a faint smile as he looked at the valley before him. He took the lead and arrived at the entrance of the valley. At that moment, 2 gray-robed old men appeared. They stared at the Wolf Emperor cold and said, Token of the Emperor of the Underworld. The Wolf Emperor bowed slightly and took out a jade token respectfully. He handed it to the 2 men. The 2 men verified it before allowing the Wolf Emperor and the others to enter. In the past, they only needed the Wolf Emperor's token to enter the valley. Now, they needed the token of the Emperor of the Underworld. Nyation purposely sensed the strength of the 2 gray-robed old men. They were both sacred Monarch Tiani. The strength of either of the 2 old men was on par with the Wolf Emperor. The Wolf Emperor led the group into the valley and arrived at a cave deep in the valley. Take a step forward and you'll arrive at the Celestial Wolf Path. The Wolf Emperor pointed at the cave and said with a faint smile. Nyation's eyes narrowed slightly. He could sense a strange space-time aura from the cave. It seemed like the cave was a space-time gate. The others looked at the cave nervously. No one dared to be the first to enter. Follow me closely. The Wolf Emperor let out a calm smile and took a step forward. His figure immediately disappeared from the cave. The cave was like a black hole, swallowing him whole. Following this, the others dared to enter and disappeared one after another. Nyation was not in a hurry. He was the last to step into the valley. At that instant, he sensed a change in the space-time aura and found himself in a completely unfamiliar place. Is this the Celestial Wolf Path? The others could not help but feel nervous as they stared at the scenery before them. The space here seemed to be different from the outside world. The space-time here was filled with a strange aura. Besides, the light here was very weak. Even with Nyation's sharp senses, he could only sense everything within 1,000 meters around him. Apart from that, there was nothing else that was different. Nyation took a deep breath and carefully examined the auras in his surroundings. Immediately afterwards, his expression flickered. He could sense that the aura here was extremely similar to that of the spiritual space. Crap! Nyation frowned and cursed in his heart. If this was the other spiritual space, it would not take long for the others to lose control of their divine sense. Where's the Wolf Emperor? At that instant, a panicked voice was heard. It sounded extremely high-pitched, as if the person was extremely nervous. Wolf Emperor. The others reacted and yelled, only to discover that the Wolf Emperor had disappeared. Nyation's face darkened. The sudden disappearance of the Wolf Emperor had caused him to feel even more uneasy. Quickly look. What's that? Following that, another cry of alarm sounded. Someone pointed to the distant sky and shouted. The crowd was startled. They followed the direction that the person was pointing at and saw a faint light flying toward them at a rapid speed. Following this, in the blink of an eye, the light turned into a blinding ball of light. Don't tell me. Everyone's expression changed, and they were shocked, speechless. Chapter 3585. Possession by Tian Chun, Lang Chun. Everyone stared at the blazing white ball of light that was flying towards them. Their eyes trembled violently, and their expressions became sluggish. The ball of light was like a bolt of lightning. It moved at an extremely fast speed, leaving a white mark in the dark space. Tian felt an incomparably strong pressure, and he couldn't help but furrow his brows as he was shocked. It was as if the orb contained a boundless amount of energy that was exploding at an insane rate. While the crowd was still in shock, the glowing white orb suddenly trembled in the air before emitting a boundless amount of light that resembled countless tentacles, enveloping the crowd. Danger! Tian was the first to react. A pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back as he retreated with explosive speed. However, he was still one step too slow. In the air, countless tentacles descended, entangling Tian. Tian frowned and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, and his expression changed. The tentacles were extremely strange. No matter how he struggled, it was useless. Instead, the tentacles entangled him tighter and tighter. Damn it! Tian roared in a low voice as he glanced at the others, only to discover that they were all trapped by the tentacles, unable to move. In front of Tian Chen's energy, you mortals have no way to struggle. At this moment, a strange voice rang out. It was a little illusory and contained an oppressive aura, causing the faces of the crowd to turn pale. What's going on? Tian's expression darkened as he stared at the glowing orb in the air. The voice he heard earlier originated from the glowing white orb. He could faintly see a blurry face within the orb, 70% resembling a human, 30% resembling a ghost. Tian Chun. The crowd exclaimed in shock as they stared at the glowing white orb. The fear in their hearts was written all over their faces. So the glowing white orb was one of the 9 stars of the Heavenly Wolf. It was Tian Chun. But Tian Chun shouldn't be a source of energy. Why was it able to speak? Tian Chun seemed to have its own consciousness. This was too strange, causing the crowd to be filled with shock. The sacrificial offerings that guy prepared for us are you people. At this moment, Tian Chun spoke again. There was a sinister intent in his illusory voice as he said, although his talent is a bit lacking, it's still passable. It's enough to wake us up. Offerings. When Tian and the others heard Tian Chen's words, they couldn't help but be taken aback. Their expressions turned extremely ugly. Didn't they come to the Heavenly Wolf Road to fuse with Wolf Chun? Why did Tian Chun refer to them as sacrifices? What does offering mean? What did Tian Chun mean by awakening? Silver-haired kid, it's you. Suddenly, Tian Chun sneered. His blazing eyes glared at Tian. Tian frowned, and his face darkened. His eyes flashed with a cold, killing intent. It was as if Tian Chun had taken a fancy to his talent and wanted to use him as a sacrifice. Boom! Immediately afterwards, Tian sensed a terrifying soul attack that bombarded his divine sense, causing a loud boom to go off in his head. In an instant, Tian understood that Tian Chun was trying to take over his body. However, in the next moment, Tian Chun let out an ear-piercing scream. Then, his divine sense was driven out by a terrifying force. How is this possible? Tian Chun screamed in the void. His blurry face became extremely strange, shocked, and horrified. Even with his spiritual strength, he was unable to invade Tian's divine sense. This was something he had never expected. You want to take over my body? Your divine sense is not strong enough. Tianling sneered. His eyes flashed with a cold light. Then, a surge of sword essence gushed out of his body and tore the tentacles of light apart. Damn it! Tian Chun let out a low roar and instantly became violent. Suddenly, a few rays of white light whizzed out and attacked Tian. Tian frowned and swung the sword of sky in his hand. The sword's shadow shattered the rays of white light and pressed down on Tian Chun. Tian Chun reacted quickly. In a flash, he dodged the attack of the sword shadow. Son of a B asterisk TCH, you win. Tian Chen steadied himself and let out a roar. Then he released a tentacle and grabbed Ing Sanxiong. Then he turned into a ray of light and flew away. Before Nye Tian could react, Tian Chen and Ing Sanxiong had disappeared. The crowd looked in the direction where Tian Chen and Ing Sanxiong had disappeared. Their eyes trembled and they were speechless. Until now, they still had not realized what had happened. What's going on? Where's the Wolf Emperor? Why have we become this sacrifice? After a while, the crowd came to their senses. Yin Liujia roared like a ferocious beast and stamped his feet. Nye Tian frowned and glanced at Yin Liujia cold without saying a word. The others also looked gloomy and the atmosphere was solemn. Why aren't you talking? Aren't you all very powerful? Why are you all mute now? Are you all in cahoots with the Wolf Emperor? Yin Liujia looked at the crowd and became more and more agitated. He shouted crazily. Shut up. Nye Tian frowned and looked at Yin Liujia cold. Yin Liujia felt the cold, killing intent in Nye Tian's eyes, and his expression changed. He was so scared that he could not speak. If you dare say another word, I'll kill you. Nye Tian threatened directly. His eyes were as cold as ice. Yin Liujia's eyes trembled, and he subconsciously took a few steps back, not daring to make a sound. The others looked at Nye Tian, not expecting him to be so fierce. Nye Tian, he has been affected by the power here. At this time, the Ghost Emperor's voice sounded and said in a deep voice. Nye Tian nodded. He had already seen that Yin Liujia was affected by the spiritual force in the space, which was why he was so agitated. Yin Liujia was also a genius martial artist. Under normal circumstances, he would not be so idiotic. The space of the Path of the Sirius was very similar to the previous soul space. It was filled with spiritual force everywhere, which had a great impact on a martial artist's divine sense. Nye Tian did not feel any discomfort at this time, but he believed that the divine sense of the others must have begun to become unstable. Nye Tian even suspected that the soul space where they fought before was part of the Path of the Sirius, but the Wolf Emperor and the others used a special method to separate the soul space. At this time, Nye Tian could only secretly pray that everyone would stay calm and try to hold on as long as possible. Chapter 3586. The 3 stars appear, yeah. Nye Tian nodded slightly. His gaze swept across the crowd as he explained what had happened. After hearing Nye Tian's words, the master of Bodhi trees' face grew incomparably grim. He took a step forward and asked, Nye Tian, can you tell me why Tian Chen failed to possess you? Huh? Nye Tian frowned and asked, Bodhi seed, are you doubting me? When Tian Chen was attempting to possess him, a force from Nye Tian's body had suddenly pushed him out. Nye Tian did not know how this had happened. He did not understand why Tian Chen was unable to possess him either. He had thought that it was because of his strong mind power and the eternal night fox that Tian Chen was unable to possess him. However, now that he thought about it, that was not the case. The force that had suddenly appeared in his body was not simple at all. Nye Tian could not understand this point, let alone explain it to the Bodhi seed and the others. Should I not be doubting you? The Bodhi seed's face darkened, and he said in a cold tone, Do you dare say that you have nothing to do with the demonic moon wolf? The Bodhi seed's words made everyone's faces darken. They immediately looked at Nye Tian. Indeed, there was a certain relationship between Nye Tian and the demonic moon wolf. Nye Tian had first defeated the demonic moon wolf in the wolf slave field. Then, when he was besieged by various forces, the demonic moon wolf's people had appeared to help him. Moreover, in the final battle of the Wolf Knight contest, the mysterious emperor of the underworld had personally appeared and ordered 7 kills to admit defeat. Because of all these, no one would believe that Nye Tian had nothing to do with the demonic moon wolf. At this moment, even Lan Zhuiying and Su Kuanga looked at Nye Tian with a strange expression. There is indeed a relationship between evil moon wolf and I. I know the emperor of the underworld, I know 7 murders, and I also know His Highness Wolf. However, I know nothing about what happened on the Heavenly Wolf Road. Of course, Nye Tian knew what everyone was thinking. He frowned and said, "Do you think that if I was in cahoots with Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf, I would still be standing here? The reason why you're standing here right now is because the people from the Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf tribe want to know our every movement," the Bodhi seed said coldly. His entire body was surging with killing intent. "Bodhi seed, I know you don't like me and want to kill me." Nietian looked at the Bodhi seed and said solemnly, "If you think that I am Evil Moon's serious people, you can separate from me. The serious path is so big, we can go our separate ways." "Separate ways?" The Bodhi seed sneered. "Nietian, do you think that in our current situation, we will let a single demonic moon celestial wolf go?" After saying that, the killing intent on his body became even stronger. "You want to kill me?" Nietian frowned, and his expression changed. The Bodhi seed had reason to suspect him, but if he wanted to kill him because of these suspicions, he would never accept it. "It's not me who wants to kill you. It's us who want to kill you." The Bodhi seed smiled coldly, his face surging with a sinister smile. At this moment, the rest of the people, including Yin Liujia, Liang Gui, and Ming Feng, all looked at Nietian with killing intent in their eyes. Meanwhile, Lan Zhuiying and Su Kuanga were hesitating. Their eyes flickered, obviously still somewhat indecisive. They suspected Nietian, but this suspicion was not enough for them to attack Nietian. "If you two don't want to fight, then get out of my way." Although the Bodhi seed was blind, he could clearly see everything in front of him. His body directly released a wave of aura, causing Lan Zhuiying and Su Kuanga to take a few steps back. "The Bodhi seed, we are on the same boat now. If we don't work together, I'm afraid that no one will survive." Lan Zhuiying's beautiful eyes slightly trembled. She took a step forward, her whole body surging with sword aura, revealing her strong side. At this moment, Su Kuanga also took a step forward and said heavily, "I believe in Nietian." The Bodhi seed's face sank, and he said coldly, "So, you two will die together with Nian." The Bodhi seed, "Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you?" Nietian frowned, his whole body releasing sword aura crazily, his eyes surging with a low murderous intent as he spoke coldly. "Nietian, do you really think that you can kill me?" The corner of the Bodhi seed's mouth twitched. He was not afraid at all. He had fought with Nietian twice. Once he did not gain the upper hand, and the other time he lost to Nietian. However, he still believed that under normal circumstances, Nietian was definitely not his match. "The Bodhi seed, are you forcing me?" Nietian's eyes slightly narrowed. The sword aura around his body was like a sharp blade, stirring the void and making ear-piercing whistling sounds. They had already fallen into Evil Moon Tianlong's trap. Nietian really did not want to fight. Moreover, the Bodhi seed was a person with the Bodhi Buddha heart. His talent and strength were top-notch. Nietian did not want to fight, but if the Bodhi seed was aggressive, he could only fight. 4 against 3, you have no chance of winning. The Bodhi seed sneered, the sword aura around his body surging wildly, obviously ready to fight. At this time, behind the Bodhi seed were Yin Liujia, Ming Feng, and Liang Gui, while on Nietian's side were Lan Zhuiying and Su Kuanga. Although it was 4 against 3, if they really stood up, Nietian's side had a greater chance of winning. With Lan Zhuiying's strength, fighting two at the same time was no problem. However, Nietian did not want to fight. At this time, except for him, everyone else would lose control of their divine sense. During a fight, the martial artist spirit was highly concentrated, and the greater the impact. Boom! At this time, the Bodhi seed took a step forward, his whole body's aura broke out like a landslide and a tsunami, and he roared, "Nietian, even if I, the Bodhi seed, die here today, I will kill you first." "Kill me? You think too highly of yourself." Nietian was a little irritated at this time. He sneered, the sword aura broke out like a landslide, and the terrifying sword aura hit the void, extremely terrifying. Bang! The next moment, the two terrible auras collided, and a muffled sound came from the void. Nietian and the Bodhi seed retreated a few steps at the same time. "Let's fight!" The Bodhi seed roared, and a terrible power broke out instantly. His aura was monstrous. The battle of life and death was about to begin. Look over there. At this moment, Liuji suddenly shouted, looking at the void in the distance with horror. Tian and the Bodhi seed were stunned at the same time, and then they felt that something was wrong. They turned to look at the void, and the scene in front of them made their faces change in horror. In the distant sky, 3 light spots appeared at an extremely fast speed, like 3 meteors, and in the blink of an eye, they came to the side of Tian and the others. Lang Chun. Tian's eyes narrowed, and his face sank. Chapter 35:87. Chapter 35:82. Chapter 352. Your turn. 3 wolves. Everyone's eyes trembled as they looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. Before this, Lang Chun had already appeared. Although he failed to possess Tian, he managed to capture Sangqiang. At this moment, 3 wolf chins had actually appeared at the same time. How could the crowd not be alarmed? Whoosh! Hua! Whoosh! At this moment, Tian and the others didn't even have the time to react. The 3 wolf Saturns simultaneously released a blinding light. Immediately, a terrifying pressure appeared, directly enveloping them, firmly imprisoning them. Everyone felt an enormous force on their bodies, and they couldn't move at all. They couldn't help but panic. Kikik. At this time, the 3 wolf chins revealed blurry and strange faces. They laughed coldly in the void, appearing incomparably sharp. Tian Chun is right. These offerings are indeed terrible. One of them, Lang Chun, said gloomily. However, there are 2 that are not bad. Yang Chun, that brat with the Bodhi heart, is mine. Don't you dare fight with me for it. The other Lang Chun laughed maniacally as he stared coldly at the Bodhi seed. You can have that kid. I want that silver-haired kid. His heaven and earth sword heart is much more powerful than the Bodhi Buddha heart. Yang Chun laughed and stared at Tian like an evil wolf. Yang Chun, Yu Chun, since the 2 of you have chosen the best, I can only choose that little girl. Her sword spirit body isn't bad either. Xing Chun, who was the last to choose, locked his gaze on Lan Zhuiying. These 3 wolf Chun were Yang Chun, Yu Chun, and Xing Chun. They had already regarded Tian and the others as prey in a cage, and were extremely excited to divide the spoils. Damn it! The Bodhi seed growled. He hated the feeling of being treated as prey. In the next moment, the Bodhi bead appeared in his hand, and a beam of Buddhist light appeared, forcibly tearing apart the light shackles around him. Eh! The 3rd wolf Chun cried out in surprise. Then, he laughed and said, this kid is not bad. He actually activated the Bodhi bead. I'll kill you. The Bodhi seed let out a furious roar, and the Bodhi pearl shone brightly. Rays of blinding light shot out like sharp blades toward the 3 celestials. Little thing, it's impossible for you to contend against me, Yue-chun, with just this strength. Yu-chun laughed coldly. After that, a piercing light appeared. It was like a sharp blade filled with killing intent. It directly shattered the Buddhist light. Immediately after, the Bodhi seed was enveloped by a ray of light. With a cry of alarm, his entire body was actually devoured. Yang Chun, Xing Chun, I'm going back to sacrifice this kid. Hurry up and do it, Yu Chun said with a chuckle, then turned into a streak of light and disappeared. Everyone stared at the traces of light left in the air, their eyes trembling in fear. Among the 8 of them, the Bodhi seed strength was second only to Tian. Yet, he had been captured just like that. How could they not panic? Little girl, come with me. At this moment, Xing Chun laughed coldly. A ray of light shot out, enveloping Lan Zhuiying. Lan Zhuiying's beautiful eyes flickered. She released her sword intent, wanting to break free from the shackles. However, she discovered that the more she resisted, the stronger the pressure became. Little girl, you don't have the Bodhi heart, nor the heaven and earth sword heart. It's impossible for you to resist the power of the Wolf Chun. Xing Chun laughed sinisterly. After that, the ray of light condensed into a tentacle, directly grabbing Lan Zhuiying. Lan Zhuying's pretty face flickered as she exclaimed, "Nie Tian." Subconsciously, she called out Nie Tian's name. She knew that at this moment, only Nie Tian had a chance to save her. "Little girl, that kid with the heaven and earth sword heart can't even protect himself. How can he save you?" Xing Chun laughed maniacally. The tentacle of light moved, directly pulling Lan Zhuing over. "Is that so?" However, before he could finish his sentence, a cold voice rang out. Then, a ray of sword light flashed, directly tearing the Wolf Chen's shackles apart. "How is this possible?" Yang Chun and Xing Chun exclaimed at the same time, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. They didn't think that Nie Tian would be able to break free from the Wolf Chen's shackles. "I'd like to see just what kind of thing you wolves are." At this moment, Nie Tian let out a low roar. His eyes emitted a chilling light as he released the extreme demon annihilation seal. A sharp and dark aura instantly caused the surrounding space to stagnate. Xing Chun was astounded as he exclaimed. In the next moment, the extreme demon annihilation seal whistled through the air, directly piercing through Xing Chen's white ball of light. "Xing Chun." Yang Chun was shocked by the scene in front of him. He shouted, clearly panicking a little. He couldn't imagine that a cultivator at the third stage of heaven rhythm could release such a terrifying power in an instant. "It's your turn." At this moment, Niet Tian's eyes trembled. With a low roar, the sword of sky appeared in his hand. He swung the sword, and the image of the sword pressed down on Yang Chun like a mountain. "Stinking brat, I'll kill you." At this moment, Yang Chun seemed to be enraged by Niet Tian. He let out a furious roar, and a terrifying beam of light appeared above the blazing white ball of light. It was as swift and fierce as the wind and lightning, and it directly cut the sword shadow in half. Bang! The huge image of the sword trembled in the air for a moment before collapsing into pieces. Niet Tian frowned and retreated a few hundred meters. "Wah!" At this moment, the shattered white light in the void suddenly condensed together and formed a white ball of light. Niet Tian's pupils shrank as he exclaimed, "He's not dead." Xing Chun, who was destroyed by the extreme demon annihilation seal, was not dead. "What the hell are these wolves? Why are they so difficult to deal with?" "Stinking brat, you're indeed difficult to deal with." Xing Chun reappeared, but the light on the white ball of light dimmed a lot. It seemed that it was injured. "Xing Chun, let's go." At this moment, Yang Chun shouted from the side, and then his figure moved directly, leaving a trail of light in the sky. Almost at the same time, Xing Chun also disappeared. Ming Feng and Yin Liujie also disappeared with Yang Chun and Xing Chun. Obviously, these two people were taken away by the two wolves as sacrifices. Niet Tian frowned as he looked at the two streaks in the sky, his face extremely grim. These wolves were more difficult to deal with than he expected. Even if he used the extreme demon annihilation seal, he could only seriously injure one Wolf Chun. "Niet Tian, are you okay?" At this time, Su Kuanga came to Niet Tian's side and asked nervously. "I'm fine." Niet Tian smiled faintly and let out a long breath. He calmed down. Chapter 3588. 9 Sacrifices. 4 Wolf Chun appeared one after another and took away 4 people. At this time, only 4 of the 8 lords of the Azure Wolves were left. Niet Tian guessed that there would be other Wolf Chins who would also take the others away. Apart from him, Lan Zhuing, Su Kuanga, and Liang Gue couldn't resist the Wolf Chin's power at all. Xing Chun had said that without the Buddha Bodhi heart and the Heaven and Earth Sword heart, it was impossible to resist the Wolf Chin's power. So far, only 2 people had broken free from the Wolf Chin's imprisonment, and they were Niet Tian and the Bodhi Seed. It seemed that the Wolf Chin's power was very afraid of the Buddha Bodhi heart and the Heaven and Earth Sword heart. "Niet Tian, what should we do next?" Su Kuanga looked at Niet Tian and asked in a deep voice, barely able to maintain his composure. "I don't know either." Niet Tian frowned and shook his head helplessly. Although he could resist the Wolf Chun to a certain extent with the Heaven and Earth Sword heart, he had no idea what to do next. Let's go back and leave this place." At this time, Liang Gue spoke with a trembling voice, obviously very afraid. Yet Tianlong looked at him coldly and didn't say anything. Since they had entered the celestial wolf path, they couldn't easily leave. They had entered a space-time door, and now they couldn't even find the exit. The only way is to walk to the end of the celestial wolf path. After a moment, Nietion's eyes slightly darkened as he said firmly. The Emperor of the Netherworld had said that he would wait for Nietion at the end of the celestial wolf path. It seemed that only by finding the Emperor of the Netherworld would there be a chance of survival. Lan Zhuing nodded slightly, very trusting of Nietion. If it wasn't for Nietion, she would have been captured by Xing Chun. Su Kuanga and Liang Gui naturally had no objections. At this time, Nietion was their only hope. Then, the four didn't stop and continued forward along the dim path. Nietion thought as he walked. He didn't know what would happen after the Bodhi seed and the others were captured. Could it be that they would really be sacrificed? At this moment, he was worried about an even more hidden danger. Including the 7 kills, there were a total of 9 Azure Wolf Lords, and the Celestial Wolf Jochin was the 9 Great Wolf Lords. From Lang Chen's words, Nietion deduced that the 9 Azure Wolf Lords were sacrifices used to awaken the Heavenly Wolf Jochin. However, the Emperor of the Underworld had painstakingly chosen 9 Masters of the Green Wolves, but he had chosen 9 sacrifices. Why'd he do this? A person like the Underworld Emperor would not do meaningless things. Heavenly Wolf Jochin Awakening. Behind this matter, there must be an even greater conspiracy. It was just that Nietion still didn't know what this conspiracy was. Half a day later, Nietion and the others arrived outside a dark canyon. Nietion stopped in his tracks and took a deep breath. He used his divine sense to scan the area, and his heart couldn't help but shudder. He suddenly felt that the strange aura in the air seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. And in the canyon in front of him, there was a strong smell of blood, as if there was a huge blood spring in the canyon. Let's go back. Liang Gui was a little scared at this moment. His figure involuntarily retreated. Lan Zhuing and Su Kuanga both had ugly expressions. Although they were trying their best to hide the fear in their hearts, their slightly trembling eyes betrayed them. In fact, they couldn't be blamed. Even Nietion was very worried at this moment. You guys wait here. I'll go in and take a look. Nietion took a deep breath and said to Lan Zhuing and Su Kuanga beside him, Nietion, you have to be careful. Lan Zhuing nodded slightly and said softly. She was originally a strong person, thinking that she was not afraid of anything. But at this moment, in her heart, she had developed a great reliance on Nietion. Nietion nodded with a smile, then took a step forward and walked into the canyon. As he entered the canyon, the smell of blood hit his face, causing him to frown. He had seen mountains of corpses, as well as the 9 underworld blood spring, but the smell of blood there could not be compared to the canyon in front of him. However, the strange thing was that although the canyon was filled with an incomparably dense stench of blood, the surroundings were empty. There was nothing at all. Strange. Nietion could not help but frown, but in his heart, he was even more careful. He walked forward step by step. At the same time, he highly concentrated his divine sense, trying to find the source of the smell of blood. However, the more he walked forward, the more strange he felt. This canyon seemed to be no different from an ordinary canyon, but it was filled with a terrible smell of blood. Nietion's face was calm. He looked back. He had already walked a few thousand meters. He could not feel the aura of Su Kuanga and the others at all. He wanted to go a little further. If he still couldn't find anything, he would go back first. Nietion, be careful. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice suddenly sounded. It was incomparably panicked. Nietion's pupils suddenly shrank. He immediately saw a scarlet blood blade appear, directly attacking him. He frowned, instantly reacted. His figure slightly moved to the side, avoiding the blood blade attack. However, the aura of the blood blade was too fierce. On his chest, a wound appeared, deep to the bone. Blood instantly dyed his body red. Damn it! Nietion roared. His figure instantly retreated. Swish! Swish! However, at this moment, dozens of blood blades appeared at the same time, piercing through the air, heading towards him. Oh no! The sudden scene caused Nietion's eyes to tremble, his heart cursing. His star soul wings directly appeared on his back. His figure frantically retreated. However, his speed was far from the speed of those blood blades. PFFF, PFFF, PFFF. In the next instant, the sound of flesh being penetrated was heard. A few blood blades directly pierced through Nietion, instantly turning him into a man of blood. 9 sacrificial heavens. No one shall survive. At this moment, a low, murderous voice sounded, following which a layer of blood mist rose from the ground. The entire canyon was filled with a strange and eerie aura. Run! Nietion forcefully endured the intense pain, let out a low roar, and frantically ran for his life. Wah! At this moment, a giant bloody hand appeared. It was a bloody mess, dripping with fresh blood, grabbing towards Nietion. Nietion suddenly felt a sudden chill behind him, causing his eyes to tremble. Without the slightest bit of hesitation, he did not even turn his head. He turned around and slashed out with his sword, borrowing the force of the sword intent to suddenly increase his speed. At the instant when the giant bloody hand landed, his figure dashed out of the canyon. Who? Nietion stabilized his figure, exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His whole body was already drenched in cold sweat. If he had been a moment later, he would have definitely been buried under that bloody hand. What is that bloody hand? What is the 9 sacrificial heavens? Nietion slightly calmed down, his eyes trembled, his heart was filled with shock. Huh? However, the next moment, he suddenly realized something, his eyes trembled, and he said in astonishment, "Where are Su Kuanga and the others?" He looked around and found nothing. His heart sank, and his expression became extremely ugly. Lan Zhuiying, Su Kuanga, and the others unexpectedly disappeared. What a good kid with the heaven and earth sword heart, to be able to escape from the 9 sacrificial heavens. At this moment, a deep voice sounded, vigorous and mighty, revealing a strong, oppressive aura. Then, a dazzling white ball of light instantly appeared in front of Nietion. Chapter 3589. 9 sacrificial blood, cursed Nietion, looked at the blazing white ball of light in the air. His eyes trembled violently. It was difficult to hide the horror in his eyes. What appeared in front of him at this moment was Lang Chun. Moreover, this Lang Chun's aura was far more powerful than the Lang Chun he had seen before. The blazing white ball of light was extremely dazzling. It released an incomparably sharp aura that seemed capable of tearing everything apart. He had never expected that Lang Chun would appear at this time. He was in a very bad state at this time. Those blood blades had directly pierced through his body. He had nimbly dodged and avoided fatal injuries. However, he had lost too much blood. His face was as pale as paper, and his aura was somewhat unstable. Now that he had encountered such a powerful Lang Chun, he absolutely could not resist. Heaven and Earth Sword Heart Boy, it seems that you have seen the other Lang Chun. At this time, Lang Chun opened his mouth. There seemed to be a strange smile hanging on his blurred face. He said in a heavy tone, "Now, come with me. You are Emperor Chun?" Nietion's eyes sank as he asked in surprise. "Oh, you actually know." Emperor Chun was surprised. He didn't expect that Nietion would know him. Nietion frowned as he saw Emperor Chun's reaction. His face instantly turned ugly. Wolf Emperor had once said that the strength of the 9 heavenly wolves was almost the same. Only Emperor Chun's strength was far above the other 8 heavenly wolves. This Emperor Chun's aura was far stronger than the Lang Chun he had seen before. He was undoubtedly the strongest Emperor Chun. If he had encountered an ordinary Lang Chun at this time, he might have had the strength to fight. He didn't expect that it would be the strongest Emperor Chun. "Boy, since you know who I am, then come with me," Emperor Chun said in a deep voice. His voice was calm, but there was a strong, overbearing intent in it. "What if I say no?" Nietion's eyes slightly sank. A terrifying aura gushed out from his devil eye. He had previously injured a Lang Chun with the extreme devil seal. He was prepared to use the extreme devil seal again at this time. Even if he couldn't kill Emperor Chun, he should be able to cause a certain damage. Devil Eye. Emperor Chin's eyes trembled at this time. His complexion suddenly changed. He was extremely shocked. However, in the next moment, he laughed and said, "Kid, if the demon eye is still too weak. You can't hurt me. If you're smart, then surrender." "Impossible," Nietian roared in a low voice. Then, his devil eye trembled, and a dark, pupil-strength blade pierced through the sky. It then attacked Emperor Chun. Emperor Chun suddenly released a ray of light at the same time and blocked the eye power blade. Huh? Nietian's eyes trembled as he was shocked by the scene in front of him. He hadn't expected that Emperor Chun would be able to block the extreme devil exterminating seal so easily. "Boy, this emperor has already said that your devil eyes are too weak." Emperor Chun coldly smiled. He had revealed the insolence of a peerless powerhouse. "Damn it," Nietian bellowed, and the sword of sky appeared in his hand. The sword will in his body surged wildly, and the sword momentum rushed into the void, but his face became even paler. He was already seriously injured, and releasing the sword will at this moment was extremely oppressive to his martial body. Emperor Chin's strength was far beyond his expectations, but he didn't give up resisting. He wanted to fight until the end. "Kid, your fighting spirit is not bad, but it's useless in front of this emperor." Emperor Chun smiled cold, and then released a huge ray of light, which shrouded Nietian like a stormy sea. Nietian felt the incomparable pressure, and his complexion slightly changed. The sword of sky streaked across the sky and was about to slash down. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt a terrible force appear in his body. It was like thousands of sharp blades tearing his body apart. The next moment, his body trembled, and he lost consciousness on the ground. "Kid, the power of the 9 sacrifices of punishing heaven is not something you can imagine." Emperor Chen looked at Nietian and said indifferently, and then his figure moved and directly took Nietian away. Vaguely, Nietian felt that he had a very long dream. In the dream, he fell into an abyss and kept sinking. He wanted to struggle, but the more he struggled, the deeper he sank, until one moment, a hand of light appeared and pulled him out of the abyss. Nietian suddenly woke up, and his whole body was drenched in cold sweat, and his body was covered with scabs, and his whole body stank. "This?" He frowned, and his face was stunned, and he couldn't react for a long time. "Kid, you're awake." At this moment, a familiar voice sounded, and then Emperor Chun appeared, and the face in the blazing white light became much clearer. His eyes looked at Nietian and said with a faint smile, "Your martial body is stronger than I thought, and you've recovered well. Now go take a bath." Nietian frowned. He looked at Emperor Chun with a puzzled look on his face. He was dumbfounded for a long time. What's going on? Why is he here? Why didn't Emperor Chun kill him? Why didn't he take over his body? Moreover, Emperor Chun didn't show the slightest bit of malice, and on the contrary, he was very calm. "Clean yourself up first. I will explain everything to you later." Emperor Chun knew what Nietian was thinking, and said with a faint smile, "Okay." Nietian nodded. Although he really wanted to know what was going on, the stench on his body was too strong, and even he couldn't stand it. He jumped into a small lake not far away, and thoroughly cleaned himself. He found that the scabs on his body were very strange, and seemed to have some kind of incantation power on them, and it was very difficult to remove them. After half an hour, Nietian cleaned himself up and walked out of the small lake. At this time, he made an even more shocking discovery. His body's injuries had magically recovered, and his strength had advanced to the 4th level of heaven rhythm. That's right, his strength had increased again. "Little guy, you feel much better now." Emperor Chun looked at Nietian and said with a faint smile. Nietian nodded, and then asked, "You're the one who saved me? Who else but this emperor?" Emperor Chun laughed. "Your martial body is very strong, but the power of the heaven-punishing 9 sacrifice is not something you can imagine. Without this emperor, you would have been swallowed by the blood curse." 9 sacrifice blood curse? Nietian frowned, and couldn't help but be surprised. Emperor Chen nodded and said, "You fell into the heaven-punishing 9 sacrifice formation, and your body was pierced by the 9 sacrifice bloodblade. The power of the blood curse invaded your martial body, and this emperor forced it out. That's how you came back to life." So those scabs were formed by the 9 sacrifice blood curse. No wonder they smell so bad. And there's also the incantation's aura. Nie Tian murmured. He remembered that he had wanted to attack Emperor Chun. However, a dreadful force had appeared and had made him lose consciousness. That terrifying power was the power of the 9 sacrifice blood curse. Chapter 3590. Chapter 3585. Chapter 3585. The Wolf's Hour. Emperor Chun saved Nie Tian, helped him force out the power of the 9 sacrificial blood curse, restored his strength, and even helped him improve his cultivation. But Nie Tian did not understand why Emperor Chen saved him. Wasn't Emperor Chen one of the 9 stars of the Heavenly Wolf? Shouldn't he take over his body? You are the sacrifice chosen by the Emperor of the Underworld. I don't know why I saved you. Emperor Chen looked at Nie Tian, shook his head and smiled bitterly, then sighed and said, "Perhaps I see hope in you." "What do you mean?" Nie Tian frowned and looked stunned. He did not have the time to talk in riddles with Emperor Chen. "What's your name?" Emperor Chen looked a lot more serious as he looked at Nie Tian and asked. "Nie Tian." Nie Tian replied indifferently. "Nie Tian, do you know why the Emperor of the Underworld sent 9 extremely talented martial artists into the Heavenly Wolf Road?" Emperor Chen looked at Nie Tian and asked. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he nodded and said, "The Heavenly Wolf Path has the 9 moons Heavenly Wolf, and the 9 of us are sacrifices to it, right?" "Yes." Emperor Chen was slightly surprised. He did not expect Nie Tian to know something. He continued, "The sacrifice of the 9 of you is to awaken the 9 stars of the Heavenly Wolf. Awaken the 9 stars of the Heavenly Wolf." Nie Tian frowned as he did not understand. The blazing white ball of light you see now is actually a powerful seal. Emperor Chen's eyes became serious and said, "The so-called 9 stars of the Heavenly Wolf are actually 9 sealed martial artists." Nie Tian's face sank and became even more confused. Wasn't the 9 stars of the Heavenly Wolf the 9 ancient forbidden powers? How did it become 9 martial artists? And what was the seal that Emperor Chen was talking about? In ancient times, there was an ancient race called the Heavenly Wolf race. The Heavenly Wolf race had 9 sacred objects called the 9 stars of the Heavenly Wolf. Only the most powerful warriors of the Celestial Wolf clan were qualified to fuse with the Celestial Wolf 9 hours. The experts who have fused with the Heavenly Wolf 9 stars are also called the Heavenly Wolf 9 stars. They rule the Heavenly Wolf clan. Emperor Chun looked at Nie Tian and continued, "The Heavenly Wolf 9 stars will protect the Heavenly Wolf clan for generations. However, a long time ago, the Celestial Wolf clan was invaded by other clans. All of the Celestial Wolf clan members were imprisoned, and the Celestial Wolf Jiu Chun was also reduced to a prisoner. He was sealed and became Lang Chun." Emperor Chen's eyes flickered as he spoke till here. It seemed as if he was recalling something from a long time ago. Could it be that the one who invaded the Heavenly Wolf clan was the Emperor of the Netherworld? Nie Tian couldn't help but ask in surprise. "Yes." Emperor Chen nodded solemnly and said, "The Emperor of the Netherworld was the one who invaded back then. He personally sealed the Heavenly Wolf clan and also sealed the Heavenly Wolf Jiuchen." This is impossible." Nie Tian frowned, his face full of doubt. The Netherworld Emperor he knew was the Netherworld Emperor of that domain. He was absolutely not as terrifying as Emperor Chun had described. Could it be that the Emperor of the Netherworld was hiding a secret that he didn't know about? "How much do you know about the Emperor of the Netherworld?" Emperor Chen asked as he looked at Nie Tian with a strange light in his eyes. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He told Emperor Chen everything he knew about the Emperor of the Netherworld. The ancient Ming race, the heaven-punishing demon heart, the demon heart 3 forms. Emperor Chen couldn't help but sigh after listening to Nie Tian. "Nie Tian, The Emperor of the Netherworld's true identity is far more complicated than you can imagine. This, Nietion's eyes narrowed. He was startled for a moment before he asked, if the Emperor of the Netherworld is really that powerful, why would he appear in a domain? This Emperor doesn't know either. Emperor Chun shook his head. Perhaps only the Emperor of the Netherworld himself can answer this question. Nietion frowned. Since the Emperor of the Netherworld sealed the 9 stars' heavenly wolf, why would he awaken it now? The Emperor of the Netherworld wants to use the power of the 9 stars' heavenly wolf to open the heaven-punishing gate. Emperor Chen's face darkened. The heaven-punishing gate? Nietion was stunned. Nietion, your heaven and earth sword heart has already opened the sky sword, right? Emperor Chen frowned and looked at Nietion. Yes. Nietion nodded. His sky sword heart had opened with the Bodhi seed's Bodhi bead. The heaven-punishing gate of the heaven-punishing demon heart is like the sky sword heart of the heaven and earth sword heart. Emperor Chen's eyes flickered as he looked at Nietion. Nietion's eyes narrowed. He seemed to have understood something. He guessed that the Bodhi Buddhist heart, the heaven and earth sword heart, the heaven-punishing demon heart, and even the heavenly sacred heart had a deep connection with each other. Perhaps they came from the same source. The Bodhi Buddhist heart had the Bodhi bead, the heaven and earth sword heart had the sky sword, and the heaven-punishing demon heart had the heaven-punishing gate. Just like the time when the Bodhi seed went into seclusion to open the Bodhi bead, the Emperor of the Netherworld awakened the 9 stars' heavenly wolf to open the heaven-punishing gate. The heaven-punishing gate. So this is the Emperor of the Netherworld's true purpose. Nietion frowned. I'm afraid the Emperor of the Netherworld's purpose for opening the heaven-punishing gate is not that simple. He must be brewing a bigger conspiracy. Emperor Chen frowned and said. Nietion nodded slightly in silence. It was a waste for the Emperor of the Netherworld to spend so much energy to select the 9 lords of the Green Wolves and sacrifice them to the 9 stars' heavenly wolf. Perhaps Emperor Chun was right. The Emperor of the Netherworld had other plans. Sir Emperor Chun, why did you save me? Nietion's eyes suddenly darkened as he asked in a deep voice. Emperor Chun had told him so much, but he still couldn't explain why Emperor Chun wanted to save him. I saved you because I made a choice. Emperor Chun smiled bitterly as a strange light flashed in his eyes. Choice. Nietion went blank for a moment, confused. Between my life and the Heavenly Wolf Tribe, I choose the Heavenly Wolf Tribe. Emperor Chun nodded solemnly. Huh. Nietion looked at Emperor Chun and couldn't help but frown. He then thought of something and said, You want me to save your tribe? Yes. Emperor Chun looked at Nietion with a solemn face and nodded. Nietion, I see a possibility in you, a possibility to defeat the Emperor of the Netherworld. You are a warrior with the heaven and earth sword heart. You have a great chance to defeat the Emperor of the Netherworld. I can use my life to exchange for your promise. Nietion's face sank slightly. He looked at Emperor Chun, but didn't say anything. As long as you promise me to save the Heavenly Wolf Tribe, I am willing to sacrifice myself to help you merge with Emperor Chun. Emperor Chun looked at Nietion with a fiery light in his eyes and said in a deep voice, You want me to fuse with the Emperor's star? Nietion's brows wrinkled. There was a strange look in his eyes as he looked at the Emperor's star. Emperor Chun had spoken very generously, but Yi Shiwen could see something different. If Emperor Chun really thought that the Heaven and Earth Sword Heart could fight against the Emperor of the Netherworld, then why didn't he take over Nietion's body and directly occupy the Heaven and Earth Sword Heart? Rather than having Nietion rescue his clansmen, it would be better for him to rescue them himself. Chapter 3591. Chapter 3586. Chapter 3586 fused with Emperor Star. Nietion didn't believe that Emperor Chun would be so kind as to help him fuse with the power of Emperor Chun just because of a promise. I can't possess you. Emperor Chun looked at Nietion. He remained silent for a long time. Then he finally said, There's a very powerful force in your body. It prevents my spirit from entering. Nietion furrowed his brows, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Emperor Chun wasn't as simple as he seemed on the surface. His words were dignified. But it was another matter altogether. Then, the corners of Nietion's mouth twitched, and a strange light surged in his eyes as he calmly asked, "Is that all?" He still didn't believe that Emperor Chun was willing to sacrifice his life to help him in exchange for a promise, since he couldn't seize his body. Emperor Chun had just met him. So, why did he trust him so much? Emperor Chun's clansmen had been sealed for such a long time, and he himself had also been sealed. However, he had still managed to live until now despite being wronged. This showed that he was a tenacious person. His desire for revenge was very strong. Nietion found it hard to believe that he would hand over the matter of revenge to someone he had only met once. Nietion, this emperor was right about you. You're even smarter than this emperor had imagined. Emperor Chun looked at Nietion. Then, he smiled in a strange manner and said, "I don't want to die, because I still have too many things to do. But this emperor has no choice." Nietion wrinkled his brows. He was somewhat doubtful as he waited for Emperor Chun to continue. This emperor knows very well what kind of person the Underworld Emperor is. To open the heaven-punishing gate, he doesn't just need to awaken the Heavenly Wolf 9 moons. He also needs to sacrifice the Heavenly Wolf 9 moons. Emperor Chin's complexion was gloomy and unsightly. It was obvious that he was in great pain. He said, "The heaven-punishing gate needs to absorb the power of the 9 stars in order to open. And after the heaven-punishing gate opens, the Underworld Emperor will definitely sacrifice Heavenly Wolf Jochin to increase the power of his heaven-punishing demon heart. Therefore, even if I possess you and help the Emperor of the Underworld open the gate of execution, he will not let Sirius Jochin go. In front of this Emperor is only death. No matter if I help the Underworld Emperor or you, I will be killed. The choice I'm talking about isn't between me and the Sirius tribe, but between you and the Emperor of the Underworld. This Emperor doesn't completely trust you, but compared to you, the Emperor of the Netherworld is even less trustworthy." Emperor Chin smiled bitterly as he said this. He then said in a pained manner, "Nietion, do you understand why this Emperor wants to help you fuse with the power of Emperor Chun?" Nietion furrowed his brows, and his expression did not look good. Shermu could feel Emperor Chen's pain at this moment. He could feel the despair and helplessness of Emperor Chun as he faced the future. It didn't matter if Emperor Chen chose Nietion or the Emperor of the Netherworld. He would still die. Compared to the Underworld Emperor, Nietion was more trustworthy. "Lord Emperor Chun, I believe in your words." Nietion slightly nodded with a solemn look on his face. A person who was willing to sacrifice his life to save his clansmen was worthy of respect. "Nietion, this emperor can help you fuse with the power of Emperor Chun now. But this emperor wants to hear your promise first." Emperor Chen's eyes slightly trembled as he said in a heavy tone, "Yes." Nietion nodded heavily and said solemnly, "I, Nietion, promise in the name of martial arts that I will do my best to save the Heavenly Wolf clan." "Very good." Emperor Chen looked at Nietion, nodded with a smile, and said, "Nietion, this emperor will fuse with the power of Emperor Chun now." Nietion slightly nodded, but there was no joy on his face at this time. The power of Emperor Chun was nothing to him. Emperor Chen's sacrifice had placed a huge responsibility on his shoulders. "Nietion, get ready. This emperor is about to start." At this time, Emperor Chun said in a deep voice. Then, the blazing white light ball suddenly trembled and released a dazzling light that directly shrouded Nietion. Boom! In a flash, Nietion felt a terrifying oppressive force falling on him. Suddenly, a tearing pain struck his whole body. Immediately afterwards, waves of terrifying power poured into Nietion's body like torrential waves. The tearing pain made Nietion frown. His face became ferocious, and his whole body was drenched in sweat. But at the same time, he also felt that the power of his martial body was crazily soaring. At this time, an even more terrifying force appeared, and the instantaneous pain made Nietion couldn't help but scream. "Nietion, the Heavenly Wolf 9 stars is the sacred object of our Heavenly Wolf clan. The power of Emperor Chun is the strongest power of the Heavenly Wolf 9 stars. Although you are not from the Heavenly Wolf clan, your martial body is much stronger than ordinary warriors. Emperor Chen's voice sounded in a loud voice. Fusing with the power of Emperor Chun is enough to increase your strength by more than 4 levels in an instant. Boom! As his voice fell, an even more violent force roared in Nie Tian's body. At this moment, Nie Tian felt that the bones, blood, and meridians of his whole body seemed to have been tempered and improved qualitatively. The power of Emperor Chun continued to pour into Nie Tian's body for half a day before it gradually weakened. When the last ray of light disappeared, Nie Tian was already exhausted. It was a miracle that he could withstand the fusion of the power of Emperor Chun. Nie Tian. At this time, Emperor Chen's voice sounded. It was the last strand of his consciousness. You have fused with the power of Emperor Chun. From now on, you are the Heavenly Wolf Emperor of the Heavenly Wolf clan. Heavenly Wolf Emperor? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He still didn't know that fusing with the power of Emperor Chun would make him the Heavenly Wolf Emperor. Nie Tian, don't forget your promise. The people of the Heavenly Wolf clan are your responsibility. Emperor Chen's voice continued to sound, but it was getting weaker and weaker. When the last word fell, the last strand of consciousness also disappeared. Lord Emperor Chun. Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he shouted, but there was no response. Emperor Chun, the previous Heavenly Wolf Emperor of the Heavenly Wolf clan, had completely disappeared. Nie Tian didn't even know what his real name was. Nie Tian was stunned, and he felt a sense of loss. He couldn't recover for a long time. Nie Tian, check your current strength. After a while, the Ghost Emperor's voice sounded, and he couldn't hide his excitement. Okay. Nie Tian nodded slightly, and the moment he looked inside his martial body, his eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he said in astonishment, 8th stage Heavenly Charm. That's right, 8th stage Heavenly Charm. After fusing with the power of Emperor Chun, Nie Tian's strength directly soared from the 4th stage Heavenly Charm to the 8th stage Heavenly Charm, and he was only one step away from the pinnacle of the Holy Disciple realm. Nie Tian didn't expect the power of Emperor Chun to be so terrifying that it made his cultivation soar by 4 stages in an instant. More importantly, after fusing with the power of Emperor Chun, his martial body had a qualitative improvement, and his bones and meridians were even stronger than before. Chapter 3592. Taken over. Very good. Nie Tian thoroughly checked his martial body and found no abnormalities. He couldn't help but laugh. The power of the Emperor Stars had greatly enhanced his strength. In fact, it had exceeded his expectations. Nie Tian, with your current strength, even if you don't use the Divine Demon Body, you can easily fight against warriors below the 4th level of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. The Ghost Emperor was also very excited and laughed. It had to be said that Nie Tian, in addition to his terrifying talent and strength, was also extremely lucky to be able to fuse with the power of Emperor Star. Nie Tian smiled faintly and nodded. In fact, for a warrior to advance from the 4th level of Heavenly Mandate to the 8th level of Heavenly Mandate, the improvement in combat strength was not great, at least not a qualitative improvement. But Nie Tian was different. The power of Emperor Star directly improved his martial body aptitude, causing his combat strength to skyrocket. More importantly, Nie Tian's strength had reached the 8th level of Heavenly Mandate Realm, making him closer to the Heavenly Mandate Realm. Next, Nie Tian rested for half a day, restoring his martial body to its best state. It's time to find the Emperor of the Underworld. He smiled faintly, the corner of his mouth raised into a faint smile. His current strength was still unable to compete with the Emperor of the Underworld, but he had to find the Emperor of the Underworld, not only for Cher, but also to save Su Kuanga and the others. Nie Tian faintly remembered that he was unconscious for about 3 days, then spent half a day fusing with the power of Emperor Star, rested for half a day, and a total of 4 days had passed. I hope nothing happened to Su Kuanga and the others. Nie Tian frowned and murmured, Nie Tian, how are you going to save them? At this time, the voice of the ghost emperor sounded, unable to hide the worry in his voice. Although Inyetion's strength had improved a lot, the enemy he was going to face next was an expert like the emperor of the underworld. There is only one power in Inyetion's body that could barely threaten the emperor of the underworld, and that was the Earth Destruction Star Soul. But it was almost impossible to kill the emperor of the underworld with just the Earth Destruction Star Soul. Therefore, Inyetion's trip this time was extremely dangerous. Let's go take a look at the great sacrificial heaven array of 9. Inyetion frowned and said in a deep voice. When Emperor Chun helped him fuse with the power of Emperor Chun, he had said that the emperor of the netherworld had to open the heaven punishment gate in the great formation of 9 sacrificial heaven punishment. The ghost emperor nodded and did not say anything else. Inyetion didn't hesitate and headed straight for the heaven-punishing 9 sacrificial array. Soon, he arrived outside the canyon. Before entering the canyon, Inyetion once again smelled the pungent smell of blood, causing him to frown repeatedly. It was as if the stench of blood from the punishing Heaven 9 sacrifices was even stronger than before. Emperor Chun, you're back. Right at this moment, a low voice resounded, and it was accompanied by a dense smell of blood. It was ghastly and terrifying. Blazing Jiufeng. Inyetion's eyes trembled slightly when he heard this voice. A frigid light flickered in his eyes. In the next moment, Blazing Jiufeng's voice resounded. His entire body surged with the power of golden flames, and he stood in midair. The way he looked at Inyetion had become extremely strange. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Inyetion's mouth. Are you surprised to see me, Lian Jiufeng? You, Inyetion? Blazing Jiufeng's pupils abruptly shrank. Undisguisable shock appeared on his face. Of course. Inyetion smiled faintly with a hint of mockery in his eyes. He said, Who else do you think I am? How is this possible? Blazing Jiufeng's eyes shook violently as he exclaimed in disbelief. He never imagined that the person who appeared in front of him right now was not Emperor Chun, but Inyetion. However, he clearly sensed the power of Emperor Chun from Inyetion. What was going on? Could Inyetion have merged with Emperor Chun's power? Are you surprised that I've merged with Emperor Chun's power? Inyetion looked at Blazing Jiufeng and enjoyed the latter's expression very much. He smiled faintly. Impossible. Blazing Jiufeng growled. Emperor Chun should be trying to possess you. How can you have merged with Emperor Chun's power? Do you still think it's impossible for me to stand here? Inyetion smiled faintly. He didn't want to waste any more words with Blazing Jiufeng. His expression changed, and he growled. Where's the Netherworld Emperor? Blazing Jiufeng's eyes trembled. He still couldn't accept what was happening in front of him. He couldn't believe that even Emperor Chun of the Heavenly Wolf race had lost to Inyetion. I ask you, where's the Netherworld Emperor? At this moment, Inyetion opened his mouth again and let out a low roar. Then he unleashed his sword aura in a frenzy and directly enveloped Blazing 9 dust. Bang! A dull sound rang through the air. Blazing Jiufeng was forced several meters back. However, he quickly steadied himself and stared cold at Inyetion. He said darkly, You're at the 8th level of Heavenly Charm already. Haven't you reached the 9th level of Heavenly Charm as well? Inyetion smiled faintly. He wasn't too surprised. It had only been a few days since they last met, but Blazing Jiufeng was already a holy disciple at the 9th level of Heavenly Charm. His strength had basically increased by an entire realm. However, Inyetion didn't find it strange at all. He still hadn't figured out Blazing Jiufeng and the Netherworld Emperor's identities, so he wouldn't be too surprised if something happened to them. Inyetion, do you really think you'll be able to stop the Netherworld Emperor by yourself? Lian Jiufeng had calmed down quite a bit. He let out a cold growl and unleashed his aura in a frenzy. He looked like a huge fireball as the terrifying power of golden flames surged through the air. It was as if he was going to burn the entire world. Do you think you can stop me by yourself? Inyetion smiled coldly. His eyes were filled with disdain, and his sword aura was as sharp as a blade. I might not be able to stop you by myself, but the 9 of us can definitely do it. Blazing Jiufeng's lips twitched as his eyes flashed with coldness. The moment he finished speaking, 8 figures appeared in the canyon and surrounded Nietion. Nietion's eyes narrowed as he looked at the figures around him. His expression became extremely dark. He was very familiar with these 8 figures. They were the 8 blue wolf lords. However, at this moment, the 8 azure wolf masters were much stronger than before. Furthermore, their gazes were extremely strange, as if they were emitting a sinister, killing intent. Su Kwanga. Nietion's eyes darkened. He immediately looked at Su Kwanga and said solemnly. However, when Su Kwanga looked at Nietion, the corner of his mouth hung a cold smile, and his whole body was filled with killing intent. Nietion, he's no longer Su Kwanga. Blazing Jiufeng smiled coldly and said solemnly. He's been possessed. Nietion's pupils abruptly shrank. His expression abruptly changed and became incomparably dark. The Su Kwanga in front of him was like a completely different person. His eyes and aura were completely different. He had clearly been possessed. Next, Nietion looked at Lan Zhuiying. The latter's face was also extremely unfamiliar to him. Chapter 35:93. 1 against 9. Nietion was instantly enraged that Su Kwanga, Lan Zhuiying, and the others had been possessed by Lang Chun. Terrifying sword intent surged violently through the air. Nietion, what are your chances of winning against 9 great geniuses at the same time? Lian Jiufeng looked at the enraged Nietion and smiled coldly. The corner of his lips curled into a sinister smile. Nietion hadn't been possessed by Di Chun, but he had successfully fused with Di Chen's power. This had greatly exceeded Lian Jiufeng's expectations. However, Lian Jiufeng was still full of confidence. He didn't believe that Nietion could fight against all 9 of them at the same time. Although Nietion had obtained the position of Night Wolf's chief during the Night Wolf struggle, he and 7 kills hadn't won in the final battle. Therefore, it was hard to say who was stronger between 7 kills and Nietion. Adding the Bodhi seed, Lan Zhuiying, and the others, Nietion had no chance of winning at all. Attack! Nietion's gaze was incomparably dark as he stared coldly at Lian Jiufeng. His sword intent surged violently through the air like a tidal wave. Kill! Lian Jiufeng didn't waste any more words. He growled, and the other 8 immediately moved. They attacked Nietion at almost the same time. Boom! 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 In the blink of an eye, a terrifying force rumbled out and crushed down on Nietion like a colossal beast. Rumbling sounds rang out in the void, as if time and space were about to collapse. Soaring God sword formation, God execution. However, Nietion didn't show the slightest hint of fear on his face as he let out a bellow. Sword intent surged out of him like raging waves, condensing into magical symbols in the air. In the next moment, an enormous sword shadow shot up into the sky, causing the void to rumble and shake violently. Rumble, bang, bang, bang. Then, the violent forces clashed against each other, and a terrifying explosion sounded in the air. Ear-piercing whistling sounds could be heard, followed by a series of muffled sounds. Qi Sha and the other 8 people were directly blown away by the impact. Lian Jiufeng did not take action. Instead, he watched from the sidelines. The scene that entered his eyes caused his eyes to tremble in shock. He did not expect Nietion to be so terrifying. He was able to fight against 7 kills and the others alone. What was even more frightening was that Nietion was standing right in the center of the collision, yet he was not injured at all. It was hard to imagine how terrifyingly strong his martial body was. However, Nietion was fighting against the 8 of them head-on. At this moment, the blood within his body was surging violently, and his aura was somewhat unstable. 7 kills, and the others had been possessed by Lang Chun, and their strength had increased by a lot. Apart from the Bodhi seed, who was at the 9th tier of heavenly rhythm, the others had all broken through to the heavenly mandate divine master level. Fighting against 8 or even 10 heavenly mandate divine masters at the same time was nothing to the current Nietion. However, he was facing 8 monstrous genius-level heavenly mandate divine masters. This made him feel even more pressured. With 7 kills and the other's current strength, any one of them was definitely comparable to a heavenly mandate 5th-tier Divine Master. Kid, so you are the most talented among the 9. At this moment, Liang Gui, who had already been possessed by Lang Chun, laughed coldly. Then he moved and attacked directly. An enormous aura devoured the heavens and earth, blasting everything in its path. Get lost! Nye Tian's eyes trembled. With a roar, he slashed out with the sword of sky. The shadow of the sword whistled through the air, and a blinding sword radiance with a murderous aura blasted forward. Bang! With a muffled sound, a terrifying power erupted from the sword's shadow, and Liang Gui's figure was instantly knocked back, leaving a bloody trail in the air. The possessed Liang Gui was already a heavenly mandate 2nd-tier Divine Master, but he could not fight back against Nye Tian head-on. Bang! At the same time, an enormous palm fell and blasted directly on Nye Tian's body, causing him to tremble and being forced back dozens of meters. After he stabilized himself, there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Boom! Boom! Following that, another 3 enormous forces rushed over. Their auras were crazy and violent, blasting towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian frowned slightly. Sword will surged all over his body, and the sacred heaven-defying sword struck out again. A terrifying sword aura blasted out, and the sword shadow was like a raging dragon, forcefully resisting the 3 violent forces. Bang! 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 Then, wherever the sword shadow passed, 3 muffled sounds could be heard. A terrifying force exploded, forming a huge wave in the air. The wave spread in all directions, as if it was going to devour everything. The 3 figures were sent flying, and they were blasted thousands of meters away. Kill! Before Nye Tian could clearly see who the 3 people were, a low and stern voice suddenly sounded in his ears, causing his eyes to tremble involuntarily. Immediately after, he felt an extremely murderous aura coming towards him, making him feel a strong sense of threat. In the next moment, almost subconsciously, Nye Tian tilted his body slightly, and a blade of extreme, killing intent whizzed out, almost touching his chest. The razor-sharp aura left a frighteningly deep wound on his chest, which was so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood instantly gushed out of the wound, looking extremely miserable. Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and he forcefully stabilized his body. If his reaction had been a little slower just now, this extreme killing blade would have taken his life. Qi Sha! In the next moment, he suddenly turned around and looked at Qi Sha in the sky. His eyes trembled slightly. I am Xian Shun. Qi Sha's eyes were filled with murderous aura as he looked at Nye Tian coldly. Nye Tian's eyes trembled, and the shock in his heart was written on his face. In order to open the gate of heaven punishing, the Emperor of the Underworld had sacrificed Qi Sha. Right now, Qi Sha had been possessed by Xian Shun of the Celestial Wolf 9 Stars. Qi Sha, kill him. At this time, Lian Jiufeng growled, his voice extremely dark. Although Qi Sha had been possessed by Xian Shun, Lian Jiufeng was still used to calling him Qi Sha. Amen. Qi Sha nodded heavily. His demon eyes of supreme killing trembled slightly, and they flashed with cold, murderous light. They were like 2 abysses that wanted to devour everything. Demon eyes of supreme killing. Feeling the killing intent in Qi Sha's eyes, Nye Tian could not help but frown and cry out. Xian Shun had possessed Qi Sha. He did not know to what extent the demon eyes of supreme killing could be unleashed. On the other side, Bodhi Zi, Lan Zhuiying, and Ing Sangxiong stared at Nye Tian, ready to attack at any moment. Lian Jiufeng looked at Nye Tian with dark eyes. The corner of his lips curled up slightly, and he said coldly, Nye Tian, how much longer can you last? Whoosh! In the next moment, Qi Sha's figure moved. The demon eyes of supreme killing unleashed an extremely murderous aura. An extremely sharp eye bloodline power tore through the air and attacked Nye Tian. At the same time, Bodhi Zi, Lan Zhuiying, and Ing Sangxiong attacked as well. Chapter 3594. Towering sword will... Niet Tion, you're dead. Lion Jiufeng's eyes trembled slightly. It was as if he could already see Niet Tion being killed. From his point of view, Qi Sha, Bodhi Seed, Lan Zhuiying, and Ing Sanqiong were attacking at the same time. Niet Tion was severely injured and did not have the ability to fight back at all. Although 7 kills hadn't been able to kill Niet Tion, it had definitely caused Niet Tion to suffer heavy injuries. Lion Jiufeng refused to believe that Niet Tion would be able to block it. Niet Tion's eyes darkened as he felt the overwhelming pressure from the void. Boom! In the next moment, his body trembled, and an extremely violent sword will surged out like a surging tide. It filled the heavens and the earth, and outside his body, it condensed into a huge sword shadow, and its momentum swallowed the heavens. At this moment, it seemed as if the entire world was filled with Niet Tion's sword will. He was like an enormous sword that stood between the heavens and the earth, announcing that he was the absolute ruler of this world. How is this possible? Lion Jiufeng stared at the scene before him in shock. He could not believe his eyes. He could not believe that Niet Tion had burst out with such a terrifying sword intent in an instant. Qi Sha and the rest's eyes darkened, and their faces were filled with horror. 9 limits of the starry sky, sun annihilation. At that moment, Niet Tion let out a low roar. The sky's sword slashed toward the sky. The sword's shadow whistled through the air like a gigantic beast, devouring the sky. In an instant, waves of sword will rushed towards the surrounding space, as if it wanted to destroy the heavens and earth. Rumble! In the void, ear-piercing rumbles resounded incessantly. A terrifying power wreaked havoc. It was as if thousands of demons were dancing, causing the surrounding void to tremble. Lion Jiufeng could not help but back away. His fiery eyes were trembling nonstop. He was deeply shocked by Niet Tion's strength. Chi, chi, chi. In the void, ear-piercing whistling sounds resounded unceasingly. The collision and devouring of power caused the space to descend into chaos. Terrifying shock waves seemed to want to tear the heavens and earth apart. Bang! 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 After a while, a terrible muffled sound came from the chaotic void, and several bloody figures were directly sent flying, leaving bloody trails in the air. Lion Jiufeng exclaimed in shock, after which he saw a silhouette walking out from the raging waves. That silhouette had a sharp sword in his hand, and his aura towered up into the sky. His sword intent towered up into the sky, incomparably sharp. Niet Tion. Lion Jiufeng's pupils shrank involuntarily as he exclaimed in shock. Only then did he realize that Niet Tion's eyes were pitch black, and his entire body was surging with a violent aura. It was actually the aura of power released from his martial body. It was extremely terrifying. How is this possible? Lion Jiufeng frowned. His expression was extremely ugly. He could not imagine that Niet Tion could actually erupt with such terrifying power. Right now, Niet Tion seemed to have activated some kind of forbidden power. His entire body radiated with an extremely violent demonic aura. It was as if he was a demon god that had walked out of hell. Lion Jiufeng, it's your turn. Niet Tion's pitch-black eyes were as dark as the abyss. He stared fixedly at Lion Jiufeng as he spoke in a cold voice. Right now, he was in a state where the celestial evolution saint's soul, the myriad tribulation saint's soul, and the god-demon body were all activated at the same time. The pressure on his martial body was extremely great, and he could not maintain it for too long. He had to end the battle as quickly as possible. If you want to touch him, you'll have to kill me first. At this moment, a deep voice that sounded like murder rang out. Then, a figure appeared. It was 7 kills. Niet Tion's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not think that 7 kills still had the strength to fight. 7 kills had only suffered some light injuries from the impact just now. It was not fatal. Die, brat. 7 kills' eyes were bloodshot, and his killing intent was extremely sharp. With a roar, he took a step forward, and a terrifying blade of extreme killing surged out of his demon eyes of supreme killing. Immediately, The surrounding space was filled with violent killing intent. The demon eyes of supreme killing focused on killing. It had almost reached the pinnacle of killing intent. Yet Tion could not help but frown when he felt the cold, killing intent rushing towards him. His expression changed. However, his eyes darkened in the next moment. The extreme demon annihilation seal appeared at the corner of his eyes. The demon eye trembled slightly, and a terrifying eye bloodline power was unleashed. It condensed into a blade of eye bloodline power in the air and attacked. Bang! In the next instant, the two eye energies collided with each other, causing a muffled sound to ring out in the air. It was as if metal had collided with stone. Following that, the sharp eye energies surged out like thousands of sharp blades, slicing through the air. Feeling the sharp aura rushing towards him, Tion immediately retreated. After he steadied himself, he suddenly heard a shrill scream. He frowned. He saw 7 kills covering his eyes in pain. His face was covered in blood. Tion's expression darkened. He immediately realized that 7 kills' eyes had exploded. What happened? He was confused. He did not know what was going on. 7 kills. Lion Jiufeng was also stunned, and then he shouted. 7 kills' body trembled slightly, and then he fainted. Tion frowned. He felt that there were 2 powers fighting against each other inside 7 kills' body. It was very strange. He must have forcefully used the power of the extreme killing demon eyes, which caused a mysterious star power in his body to resist. Under the confrontation of the 2 powers, his extreme killing demon eyes couldn't bear it, so he exploded. At this time, the Ghost Emperor's voice sounded, and he explained in a deep voice. Tion nodded slightly, but he was silent inside. Emperor Chun had said that the Heavenly Wolf 9 Stars was a sacred artifact of the Heavenly Wolf race. Not everyone could fuse with it. Perhaps the profound stellar power and 7 kills demon eye of extreme killing were unable to fuse, and they clashed against each other, causing the demon eye of extreme killing to explode. Damn it, Lion Jiufeng growled as he stared at 7 kills on the ground. Then, he turned to look at Tion with an extremely ugly expression. Given Tion's current state, he did not have the ability to resist. At this time, Tion suddenly turned around and stared at Lion Jiufeng like a wolf. Tion, what do you think you're doing? Lion Jiufeng was clearly very nervous. His teeth were chattering, and he subconsciously blocked the entrance of the canyon. His eyes were panicked. I'll say it one more time, move. Tion said coldly and murderously. There was definitely something fishy about the canyon for Lion Jiufeng to be so nervous. Perhaps the Emperor of the Underworld was inside the canyon right now. You'll have to kill me if you want to enter the canyon. Lion Jiufeng's eyes trembled, and he took a step forward. He was clearly very determined and unyielding. You're courting death. The corner of Tion's mouth twitched. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he shouted coldly. Chapter 3595. Never change one's original intention. Lord Emperor of the Underworld. Lion Jiufeng's eyes narrowed slightly when he heard the voice. Get out of the way. Tion's eyes darkened as he growled again. He did not want to kill Lion Jiufeng, but if the latter dared to stop him again, he would have no choice but to kill him. Lion Jiufeng's expression was dark, but he still moved aside in the end. Tion looked at the canyon in front of him, and without hesitation, he took a step forward and entered the canyon like a ray of light. Tion, I never thought that you would be able to make it this far. The Emperor of the Underworld's deep voice rang out the moment he entered the valley. Tion immediately felt a strong, pungent smell of blood enveloping him. I didn't expect you to sacrifice 7 kills just to open the gate of retribution. Tion's mouth twitched as he spoke coldly. He stood coldly in the air and was very cautious. His gaze swept across the void, but he didn't find the Emperor of the Underworld. Oh, at this time, the Underworld Emperor was surprised and said, You actually know about the punishing Heaven Gate? It seems like Emperor Chun has told you a lot of things. I don't know a lot of things. However, there are still many things that I don't know yet that I want to know. Tion smiled faintly. His consciousness searched the void, not daring to be careless in the slightest. The voice of the underworld emperor was eerie and illusory, as if it came from all directions. And yet Tion couldn't see the figure of the underworld emperor, nor could he determine his location. Yet Tion, what do you want to know? Ask away, the underworld emperor said calmly with a faint smile. He was not in a hurry to attack. Who are you? Yet Tion frowned and asked directly. I am the master of the heaven punishing devil heart, the devil punishing the heavens. The underworld emperor's voice rang out. Instantly, the air was filled with a strong smell of blood. He said, You should be wondering why I appeared in the realm verse. Why? Yet Tion's eyes darkened. The heaven-punishing demon heart is far more powerful than you can imagine. The emperor of the underworld paused for a moment before he suddenly let out an eerie laugh. He said, I once opened the heaven-punishing demon heart to the ninth heaven. At that time, I was the strongest person in the original ancient sacred world. Yet Tion frowned, a confused expression on his face. He didn't quite understand what the underworld emperor said. Yet Tion, I believe Shun has already told you that this emperor once invaded the Skywolf world. The underworld emperor was aware of Tion's doubts. He laughed arrogantly and said, At that time, what I need is to activate the power of the heaven-punishing demonic heart to its ultimate state. Unfortunately, this emperor failed at the final moment of the heaven-punishing demon heart's activation. However, this emperor did not give up. This emperor personally sealed the heaven-punishing demon heart, allowing it to return to its original state. This emperor is preparing to reawaken the heaven-punishing demon heart and let it reach its final state. Regrettably, the heaven-punishing demon heart cannot be awakened after being sealed. This emperor tried all methods and finally discovered that the Three Lives Meridian has a special stimulating effect on the heaven-punishing demon heart. Therefore, this emperor searched all the sacred worlds and realms and finally found 3 family clans with the Three Lives Meridian. This emperor killed all the members of these 3 family clans, condensed their bloodline power, and infused it into the heaven-punishing demon heart. At that time, as long as this emperor infused his own power into the demon heart would be awakened. In order to not cause a commotion, this emperor ultimately decided to awaken the demon heart in the realm. As for the evil moon Skywolf, this was actually arranged by this emperor a long time ago. The existence of the evil moon Skywolf was to allow this emperor to smoothly return to the sacred world after becoming a sage in the realm. Every wolf emperor of the evil moon Skywolf has been waiting for this emperor's return. Ha ha ha. Towards the end, the underworld emperor actually laughed maniacally. Tion's eyes trembled incessantly when he heard the underworld emperor's words. He didn't fully understand the underworld emperor's words, but he roughly understood what had happened. The underworld emperor had once developed the heaven-punishing demon heart to its limits, but he had failed in the end. In order to develop the heaven-punishing demon heart again, he had sealed the demon heart. Later on, in order to awaken the demon heart, he had accidentally appeared in the realm. And from the underworld emperor's words, Tion also heard another very important piece of information. 3 family clans with the Three Lives Meridian. The underworld emperor had killed the members of these 3 family clans and infused their bloodline power into the heaven-punishing demon heart. Coincidentally, 7 kills, Blazing Jufeng, and Cher were 3 people with the Three Lives Meridian, and they had been born from the heaven-punishing demon heart. Tion, your guess is correct. At this time, the underworld emperor's voice sounded again. He said in a low voice, 7 kills, Blazing Jufeng, and Cher were born from the 3 bloodline powers and the power of the heaven-punishing demon heart. It can be said that the 3 of them are the last bloodline of those 3 families. However, Cher was an accident that even I had underestimated. As the underworld emperor spoke, his voice became very strange. It was trembling slightly, as if he was worried about something. You are the master of the heaven-punishing demon heart, the enemy of their clans. Tion's eyes trembled slightly as he said coldly, Share and the other two had been born from the bloodline powers of those three families, and the Underworld Emperor had killed the members of those three families. Enemy of the clans? The Underworld Emperor laughed. His voice was extremely cold. You can say that. Nietion's eyes trembled. He didn't expect the Underworld Emperor to say it so easily. It was as if the Underworld Emperor didn't think it was important at all. After all, the Underworld Emperor had destroyed three families. To a person like the Underworld Emperor, perhaps killing people wasn't something he cared about. What he cared about was power, supreme power. At that moment, the Netherworld Emperor said in a deep voice, Nietion, you're destined to become an expert who stands at the peak of the world, and your kindness will be the biggest obstacle on your way to becoming an expert. Perhaps it's because you're still too weak. When you've truly become stronger, when you've far surpassed others, you'll understand that those people are no different from ants to you. No different from ants? Nietion frowned. The corners of his mouth twitched as he sneered. Is that really the case? Martial artists were also human beings, just stronger ones. If they didn't respect life, then what was the point of a martial artist living? The current Nietion was indeed not strong enough. However, to ordinary people, he was already a godlike existence. However, in his heart, the respect he had for every living thing had never changed. Never change one's original intention. Nietion, I've told you enough, the Empress said coldly. At that moment, the Underworld Emperor's voice was heard, but it carried a hint of evil aura. Following this, the smell of blood in the void became unusually intense and violent. Nietion's eyes trembled as his heart sank. Chapter 3596. Blood Sacrifice Formation. Nietion's eyes flickered when he saw the giant blood-colored hand appearing in the air. He could feel a tremendous pressure coming from it, causing his heart to tremble. He had seen the giant blood-colored hand the first time he had entered the canyon. He had even died to it. To his surprise, the giant blood-colored hand had appeared once again. Bang! In the next moment, the huge blood-colored hand suddenly moved and descended from the sky. Like a blood-colored curtain, it madly pressed down on Nietion. Nietion's eyes widened. He could feel a terrifying pressure coming from all directions, as if his body was about to be torn apart. Screw it. His eyes flickered as he let out a deep roar and prepared to unleash the destructive Earth Astral Soul. The destructive Earth Astral Soul was his strongest trump card against the Emperor of the Underworld. Nietion, wait a minute. The Ghost Monarch's voice suddenly appeared in a panic. Nietion's body stiffened. He was unable to resist as the giant blood-colored hand immediately surrounded him. Damn it! He let out a low roar as he sensed that the surrounding space was filled with an extremely dense, bloody energy. It was like steel needles stabbing into his body. In the blink of an eye, Nietion was covered in blood. Ghost Monarch, what's wrong? Nietion asked while enduring the pain. If the Ghost Monarch had not stopped him, he would have used the destructive Earth Astral Soul. This is the punishing heaven's 9 sacrifices. With your strength, the destructive Earth Astral Soul is no match against the giant blood-colored hand. The Ghost Monarch said in a deep voice, if you had used the destructive Earth Astral Soul just now, it would have been a waste of energy. Nietion frowned, his face extremely unsightly. He could feel that he had no chance of resisting the giant blood-colored hand. The giant blood-colored hand was too terrifying. As the Ghost Monarch had mentioned, even if he used the destructive Earth Astral Soul, it would be a waste of energy. But what should he do now? He was like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Nietion, the power of your bloodline is even more terrifying than I imagined. At this moment, the Emperor of the Underworld's voice rang out again. Then, a blurry black figure appeared, standing on top of the giant blood-red hand. Nietion could vaguely see the figure of the Underworld Emperor through the huge hand. But at this time, he was completely controlled by the blood-red hand and couldn't move at all. Nietion, Dichun must have told you that I need the power of the 9 stars, Heavenly Wolf, to open the heaven-punishing gate. Then, the Underworld Emperor laughed wildly and said, unfortunately, he was wrong. This emperor needs the power of the punishing Heaven 9 sacrificial array to open the punishing Heaven gate. The Heavenly Wolf's bloodline power is only used to activate the great sacrificial Heaven 9 sacrificial heaven formation. Hearing what the Underworld Emperor said, Nyation couldn't help but tremble. It turned out that the Underworld Emperor had awakened the Heavenly Wolf Jochin for the sake of Jochin's bloodline power. The Heavenly Wolf 9 stars was not the key to opening the punishing Heaven gate, but the punishing Heaven 9 sacrificial array. Nyation, don't you think it's a bit too late for you to only know this now? The Underworld Emperor laughed again and said, right now, you are restrained by the hand of blood curse and can only watch as you become the sacrifice of this Emperor's punishing Heaven 9 sacrificial array. This must feel terrible. Ha ha ha. At the end, the Underworld Emperor laughed madly, as if he had gone mad. Damn it, Nyation bellowed, his eyes bloodshot like a ferocious beast. But at this moment, he was too weak and had already lost the ability to resist. Moreover, he had used up a lot of blood energy in the battle against 7 kills and the others. His martial body was at its limit. Worst of all, he was restrained by the hand of blood curse and couldn't move at all. Jiufeng, bring the others in. At this time, the Underworld Emperor looked outside the canyon and said loudly. Yes, Lion Jiufeng answered and brought the other 8 people in. The Underworld Emperor wanted to use the bloodline power of Nyation and the others to open the punishing Heaven 9 sacrificial array directly. The Underworld Emperor glanced at Lion Jiufeng and waved his hand, sending 7 kills and the others into the hand of blood curse. 7 kills and the others had been seriously injured by Nyation and were on the verge of death, but their bloodline power still remained. Jiufeng, did you hear what this emperor said just now? At this time, the Underworld Emperor did not open the formation directly. Instead, he looked at Lion Jiufeng and asked. I heard. Lion Jiufeng nodded in response. He didn't even dare to raise his head to look at the Underworld Emperor. This emperor is the enemy who exterminated your clan. Do you hate this emperor? The Underworld Emperor's lips twitched as he asked with a smile. This subordinate does not dare. Lion Jiufeng trembled in fear and fell to his knees. He said, without the Lord Underworld Emperor, there would be no subordinate. This subordinate's life is given by the Lord Underworld Emperor. This subordinate swears to follow the Lord Underworld Emperor for the rest of my life. Umph. The Underworld Emperor looked at Lion Jiufeng and smiled faintly. He said, get up. I don't care if you follow me for the rest of your life. I only want your loyalty for this life. Lion Jiufeng nodded heavily. He did not raise his head to look at the Underworld Emperor. Nyation's face grew very unsightly as he witnessed everything that had happened. All right, everything is ready. We can begin. A moment later, the Underworld Emperor smiled faintly and formed a strange seal with his hands. Immediately, the hand of blood curse began to release terrifying blood blades. The blood blades directly pierced into the martial bodies of Nyation and the others and actually began to crazily absorb their blood. Oh no! Nyation frowned and exclaimed in his mind. He saw that the aura of the formation in the surrounding space instantly strengthened after their blood entered the hand of blood curse. Boom! A moment later, the entire canyon suddenly rumbled. The great sacrificial heaven formation of 9 sacrificial heaven was activated. At this time, the hand of blood curse began to release curse after curse. Dark and bloody, they slowly surged into the Underworld Emperor's body. The Underworld Emperor stood coldly in the air and madly absorbed the 9 sacrifices incantation. The heaven-punishing demonic chi on his body immediately grew stronger and stronger. The demonic chi around him roiled and churned. It was extremely terrifying. Nyation looked at the Underworld Emperor and felt the heaven-punishing demonic chi on the latter's body. His expression darkened, but now he was powerless. He could not resist at all. As the Underworld Emperor continued to absorb the 9 sacrifices incantation, the heaven-punishing demonic chi on his body grew stronger and stronger. A dark energy slowly gathered inside his body and condensed into a solid form. A moment later, a ball of dark energy appeared behind the Underworld Emperor. It was like a dark abyss, exuding an abnormally strong heaven-punishing demonic chi. What a powerful heaven-punishing demonic chi! Nietion's eyes trembled when he saw the ball of dark energy. At that moment, the dark aura began to undergo a strange transformation. Very quickly, it gathered in the void and gradually turned into a door of darkness. Chapter 35:97. Irreconcilable. When Nietion saw the door of darkness behind the Emperor of the Underworld, his eyes trembled and he was stunned. That door of darkness was like an endless abyss, surging with monstrous heaven-punishing demonic chi. That kind of dense aura was like a giant beast hidden in the void, opening its dark mouth, wanting to devour everything. Nietion looked at the door of darkness and felt as though his mind was being devoured. It was as though the door of darkness could strip him of everything in an instant. This was Nietion's first time encountering such a dark and terrifying aura, and it caused his divine soul to tremble. Even though he had a tough temperament, he couldn't help but panic at this moment. Without a doubt, this gate of darkness was the gate of heaven punishing that was born from the heaven-punishing demon heart. Punishing Heaven Gate has finally appeared. At this moment, the voice of the Emperor of the Underworld rang out. It was incomparably deep and filled with a tremendous pressure. It was as if even the heavens and earth were suppressed by this aura and could only bow their heads in submission. At this moment, the Emperor of the Underworld was like a demonic god standing between heaven and earth. His entire body emitted a dark aura that suppressed everything. Looking at the Emperor of the Underworld, Nietion couldn't help but tremble. The fear in his heart was written all over his face. He did not expect the Emperor of the Underworld's aura to be so powerful. The sword heart of heaven and earth, the Buddha Bodhi heart, and the heavenly devil heart. Shouldn't they be at the same level? Even if there was a difference in strength among the three, there shouldn't be such a huge difference. When Nietion activated the Sword of the Sky with his sword heart of heaven and earth, and when the Bodhi seed activated the Bodhi bead with his Bodhi Buddha heart, they were not as terrifying as the Underworld Emperor was now. It seemed that the Emperor of the Underworld's heaven-punishing demonic heart was far more powerful than the sword heart of heaven and earth and the Bodhi Buddhist heart. Could it be because the Emperor of the Underworld had once sealed the heaven-punishing demon heart, and now that the demon heart was open for the second time, it released such a terrifying aura? Boom! Just as Nietion was in a state of bewilderment, the blood curse hand became even more berserk. It constantly absorbed his blood, causing the blood chi in his body to become incomparably berserk. It was as if his entire body was about to explode. At the same time, the blood curse symbols all over the Underworld Emperor's body became even more terrifying. They surged crazily, and a bloody aura filled the entire valley. Boom! Then, the gate of execution behind the Emperor of the Underworld suddenly vibrated, and then suddenly expanded. Like a dark abyss, it began to expand, extremely terrifying. Nietion could feel the heaven-punishing demonic chi in the surrounding space. His eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he was speechless. In the blink of an eye, the heaven-punishing gate grew to a height of several hundred meters. It was like a dark void that stood upright in the sky, constantly releasing an aura that could devour everything. Nietion's eyes trembled as he forced himself to remain calm. He didn't know what the Underworld Emperor would do next. After a while, the power of the blood curse hand seemed to weaken a little, and the pressure became a lot less, giving Nietion a chance to breathe. Nietion, it's not time yet. At this moment, the voice of the Ghost Emperor rang out. He knew that right now, Nietion wanted to use the power of the earthly extermination astral soul to break free from the blood curse hand. But right now, the blood curse hand was still too strong. Nietion couldn't break it if he attacked now. Yes. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly, and he nodded solemnly. At this time, the heaven-punishing gate seemed to have grown to its limit. It did not expand any further. and like a wall of darkness, it stood tall in the sky. The heaven-punishing gate continued to release a monstrous amount of demonic chi. The power of darkness surged in the sky as if it wanted to devour and destroy everything. The heaven-punishing gate has opened. This is a path of blood sacrifice. Who will be the first to be sacrificed? At this time, the Emperor of the Underworld's deep voice rang out. Then, he looked at Lian Jiufeng and said solemnly, Lian Jiufeng, it will be you, Lord Emperor of the Underworld. Lian Jiufeng's eyes trembled as he exclaimed in shock. He was clearly panicking. He could feel an unusually strong, killing intent from the Emperor of the Underworld. Nye Tian's eyes darkened. He was stunned. He didn't think that the Emperor of the Underworld would want Lian Jiufeng to be the first blood sacrifice of the heaven-punishing gate. Lian Jiufeng, it is your honor to be the first blood sacrifice of the heaven-punishing gate. The Emperor of the Underworld's eyes locked onto Lian Jiufeng as he declared loudly. The heaven-punishing gate slowly released a terrifying demonic chi the moment he finished speaking. It formed a heaven-punishing demonic hand in the sky. It was incomparably dark and seemed capable of ripping apart everything. Lord Emperor of the Underworld, are you really going to kill me? Lian Jiufeng's eyes trembled as he abruptly raised his head to look at the Emperor of the Underworld. He had actually calmed down quite a bit. Lian Jiufeng, didn't you just say that you were willing to follow me to the death? The Emperor of the Underworld sneered and said, Why are you hesitating when I ask you to sacrifice yourself to the heaven-punishing gate? I'm not hesitating. I just want to confirm if Lord Emperor of the Underworld really wants to kill me. Lian Jiufeng frowned. His eyes surged with flames, and a strange light appeared in them. At the same time, his lips curled into an evil smile. My words are as good as 9 cauldrons. The Emperor of the Underworld seemed to notice something as he stared at Lian Jiufeng. His expression changed slightly as he growled. Is that so? Lian Jiufeng's eyes narrowed slightly as the corner of his lips twitched. He said coldly, So 7 kills Shui, and I are just sacrifices in your eyes. We're all willing to die if you need us to. Is that so? Of course. The Emperor of the Underworld sneered and said, Your lives are bestowed upon you by me. When I need you, you should be sacrificed. Sacrificed? Well said. Lian Jiufeng's gaze darkened slightly as great killing intent appeared in his eyes. He suddenly growled. Then should the 3 races of the lineage of 3 lives be sacrificed as well? The Emperor of the Underworld's expression darkened when he saw Lian Jiufeng. Then he sneered, Lian Jiufeng, you've really grown up. How dare you question me? I will not live under the same sky as you for the destruction of my race. Lian Jiufeng's eyes were as dark as killing intent. He said coldly, practically squeezing out the word from between his teeth. The Emperor of the Underworld's eyes trembled, and his expression changed once more. He said, You knew that I was the one who destroyed your race. Emperor of the Underworld, do you think you can seal my memories forever? Lian Jiufeng's eyes were as cold as ice. He said sternly, I remembered everything the moment I set foot in the Saint's world. Oh! The Emperor of the Underworld's eyes darkened slightly, but then he laughed and said, It looks like I've underestimated you. The Emperor of the Underworld did not think that Lian Jiufeng would be able to release his memories of 3 lives. However, he did not panic at all. With his strength, killing Lian Jiufeng would only take an instant. Nye Tian looked at Lian Jiufeng and the Emperor of the Underworld with trembling eyes. He did not think that such a dramatic change would occur. Earlier, when the Emperor of the Underworld had tested Lian Jiufeng, the latter had shown respect and obedience. It was strange to Nye Tian. Based on his understanding of Lian Jiufeng, the latter was not an obedient sheep. Lian Jiufeng's calmness after learning that the Emperor of the Underworld was the one who destroyed his race did not match his personality at all. As it turned out, Lian Jiufeng had purposefully endured until this moment. Emperor of the Underworld, I'm not the only person you've underestimated. Lian Jiufeng smiled coldly at the Emperor of the Underworld. Chapter 3598. Even more ruthless. The Underworld Emperor's expression was cold. His eyes were like the abyss as they locked onto Lien Jiufeng. He had already opened the gate of punishing heaven. Coupled with his strength as a 9th-level heavenly justice Saint Monarch, killing Lien Jiufeng was a piece of cake. Even if Lien Jiufeng had awakened the memories of 3 lifetimes, even if he wanted a rebel, what could he do? He couldn't change the outcome at all. The Underworld Emperor had wanted to kill everyone present in the first place. Lien Jiufeng's sudden rebellion was just adding some fun to the show. Your confidence will destroy you, Underworld Emperor. The corner of Lien Jiufeng's lips twitched. His eyes shone with an evil light. Show me what you've got. The Underworld Emperor let out a laugh and said with a meaningful expression, "You are an accident in this chess game of mine. I will let you die last so that you will have a deeper understanding of what despair is. I look forward to the despair you speak of." A strange smile appeared on Lien Jiufeng's face. Then he suddenly looked at Nie Tian and said, "Nie Tian, a mere hand of blood curse shouldn't be able to trap you, right?" Nie Tian frowned. His expression changed slightly. He didn't think that Lien Jiufeng would want him to stand out a time like this. Lien Jiufeng seemed to have extraordinary trust in Nie Tian. He was certain that Nie Tian could help him at a time like this. "Lien Jiufeng, the trump card you've prepared isn't Nie Tian, is it?" The Underworld Emperor sneered and said, "I admit that Nie Tian's talent is terrifying, but do you really think that a mere holy disciple can threaten me?" The Underworld Emperor hadn't interacted much with Nie Tian, but he knew that Nie Tian's talent was far greater than other cultivators of the same level. Unfortunately, he was a peak Saint Monarch right now. No matter how heaven-defying Nie Tian was, he couldn't threaten him. Boom! As soon as the Underworld Emperor's voice fell, the hand of the blood curse suddenly shook strangely, as if it had been hit by a terrifying force. The Underworld Emperor suddenly sensed something. His gaze froze, and his expression changed instantly. "Earth Annihilation, Astral Soul, come out." At this moment, a deep roar rang out. It was none other than Nie Tian, after which a vast amount of astral energy soared up into the sky, causing the blood curse hand to tremble violently, as though it was about to collapse. How is this possible? The Underworld Emperor frowned, and he instantly felt uneasy. He cried out in surprise, and his voice became shrill and extremely ear-piercing. He had never imagined that Nie Tian would be able to unleash such a terrifying power in an instant. Boom, 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 boom. In the next moment, a terrifying power exploded. Suddenly, a huge ray of starlight appeared in the sky, like a sharp sword, and directly pierced through the hand of the blood curse hand. Immediately, a terrifying roar rang out, and the hand of the blood curse hand collapsed, turning into an endless amount of blood energy that scattered in the void. Then, a figure covered in blood soared into the sky like a sharp blade. He stood in the air, and his eyes were like the stars, staring at the Underworld Emperor. It was Nie Tian. Nie Tian. The Underworld Emperor's eyes suddenly trembled, and he was extremely shocked. He couldn't imagine how Nie Tian could release such a shocking power that directly shattered his hand of the blood curse hand. Although the hand of the blood curse hand's power was greatly weakened after the heaven punishment array of 9 sacrifice was activated, it was still very powerful. Even an ordinary Saint Monarch Tianyi might not be able to break it. Nie Tian was only a heavenly charmed saint disciple. How could he destroy the hand of the blood curse hand? Nie Tian, you really haven't disappointed me. At this time, Lien Jiufeng looked at Nie Tian and smiled faintly. Do you trust me that much? Nie Tian frowned and asked solemnly. Right now, he was in a very bad state. His blood energy had almost been completely drained by the hand of the blood curse hand, and his face was frighteningly pale. When Shisha fought you back then, if both of you had used your full strength, the one who would have lost would have been him. Lien Jiufeng laughed and said indifferently. Nie Tian's eyes focused. So Lien had been waiting for that moment to see that he had an extremely powerful trump card. As expected, Lien Jiufeng was very terrifying. Nie Tian, I've indeed underestimated you, Nie Tian said. At this time, the Netherworld Emperor calmed down. His gaze swept across Nye Tian and then landed on Lian Jiufeng. He said, "But this Emperor's greatest miscalculation is still you, Lian Jiufeng. You are too confident, Netherworld Emperor." Lian Jiufeng smiled faintly, a strange light surging in his eyes. "Is that so?" The Netherworld Emperor's eyes darkened slightly, and he sneered. He said, "This Emperor would like to see how the two of you can fight against this Emperor. Netherworld Emperor, if I want to defeat you, I must be even more ruthless than you." Lian Jiufeng's eyes flashed. He said, "Aren't you curious why Qi Sha sacrificed himself so willingly?" The Netherworld Emperor's eyes darkened when he heard Lian Jiufeng's words. He exclaimed in surprise. In order to awaken the heavenly wolf Jiuchen, he did not hesitate to sacrifice Qi Sha. Qi Sha had willingly been possessed by Xian Shun and became a sacrifice for the heaven-punishing 9 sacrifices. At the time, the Netherworld Emperor found it a little strange. With Qi Sha's personality, why would he be so obedient? One had to know that Qi Sha had already disobeyed the Netherworld Emperor when he fought against Nye Tian. Qi Sha dared to disobey the Netherworld Emperor over such a small matter, so it was a little strange that he would obey when it came to his life. It was at this moment the Emperor of the Netherworld suddenly noticed something. His expression changed to one of extreme fear. He looked at Lian Jiufeng with trembling eyes and asked, "Lian Jiufeng, what did you do?" "I told you, if I want to defeat you, I must be even more ruthless than you." Lian Jiufeng smiled coldly, his eyes shining with cold, murderous light. "You pfft." The Netherworld Emperor's eyes trembled. He was just about to speak, but he suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood. He said in shock, "What did you do?" Before Xian Shun took over Qi Sha's body, Qi Sha had activated extreme, killing, soul killing. Lian Jiufeng's lips twitched as he said indifferently, "Extreme, killing, soul killing." The Netherworld Emperor's eyes abruptly shrank in shock. He said, "Lian Jiufeng, you actually made Qi Sha use blood killing just to kill me. He's going to die anyway, so why not kill you after he's dead?" Lian Jiufeng smiled coldly. His eyes were cold. It was at this moment that blood-colored runes appeared on the Netherworld Emperor's body. Then they tore his body apart and turned him into a bloody man in an instant. Nye Tian was stunned. He was so stunned by the scene that he couldn't speak for a moment. He did not expect that the situation would take such a drastic turn and develop to this stage.